Good evening. Welcome to the March 10th? 23rd. 23rd work session of the Village Board of Trustees. This meeting is now called to order. We will begin with the pledge, followed by a moment of silence for the victims in Belgium.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Trustee Codman?
Present.
Trustee Levin?
Present.
Trustee Bazemore?
Present.
Trustee Quezada?
Present.
Mayor Garrity?
Present.
Are there any mayor or trustees announcements?
Oh, yeah, I was thinking we would go right into the other stuff, but yes, well, I will let folks know that our agenda is very much focused on housing this evening, and we are going to cover a lot of topics related to housing. Unfortunately, the Director of Planning and Economic Development is home with a really unpleasant sickness, and we wish her well and hope that she's better soon. So it's going to end up being a two-part public discussion about housing. Fortunately, it was a very full agenda to begin with, so we are going to hear from folks who are with us this evening, some for the first time, some for the manyth time, and we will decide on a date in either in the relatively near or very near future to pick up where we left off in our discussion with housing. And I guess I'll also do my organizational announcements now because there's so many, and if anybody else has any, then please jump in right after. At our next work session, which will be back in this room at Village Hall on April 13th, we will be discussing water. That agenda will be focused almost exclusively on water, all the comprehensive approach that we have to our potable water system, from the new conservation initiatives we have, as well as leak detection and planning for the future. And that is all in the week leading up to Earth Day. And the day after, we have our water discussion. You can join Andrew Teese, and he is our water superintendent of water and sewer. He will be on the panel for the movie Flow at the library at 6:30 that Thursday, April 14th. And he'll be discussing the documentary Flow, and then you'll get some real firsthand insights. It's always a nice conversation and give and take with the panelists. And of course, if anybody is familiar with environmental science teacher Artie Carlucci from Ossining High School, he will be on the panel as well with us. And oh, I almost forgot. Before we even get to our meeting on the 13th, please join us at the Recreation Center, where we will have our ribbon cutting for the Sing Sing Kill Greenway. We're very excited. Also related to water, sort of in a different way, but our sanitary sewer project needed to be done in the Sing Sing Kill Greenway, and we upgraded it not to just a walkway for maintenance folks, but because it was such a magnificent location, to be a public greenway. And so we're going to have the ribbon cutting for that at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the 13th of April. We hope you will join us. It will be a really fun event. And then you can, if you miss the ribbon cutting on the 13th, you can check out some more exciting happenings on the Greenway and at the Ossining Waterfront on Saturday, the 16th. It's the 6th Annual Earth Day Festival. Green Ossining organizes this at the waterfront. It is, to my knowledge, the largest Earth Day celebration in the county, and it gets bigger every year. So the festival runs from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. There's music, there's food, there's activities. It's great for anybody and the whole family, and it's just a beautiful way to spend your day at the Ossining Waterfront. And that afternoon from 2 until 5, anybody who's interested in touring the Greenway and having some specialists to learn from, our captain of the police department, Scott Craven, who's also a local historian, will talk about the Sing Sing Kill Greenway from an historic perspective. There'll be somebody talking about it from environmental, geological, and engineering perspective. And you can also get access to the Weir Chamber. Our friends of the Old Croton Aqueduct will be there for that. The town reassessment process is still underway. I'll just remind folks, if you're interested in asking questions of Tyler Technologies, you can go to thetownofaustining.com to get more information about it, and you have the information that you would have received if you're a property owner anywhere in the town of Austining. There's an 800 number, 800-273-8605 with questions. I just came to this room earlier today and met with Tyler Technologies and called to their attention something that I thought was a little inaccurate, and he wrote it down, and we'll see what happens. And it was really quite simple and efficient, so we'll just see how that turns out. All right. John, you had some further announcements?
Yeah, I want to remind everybody about an event on Saturday, April 9th, at the Steamer Firehouse on Main Street. And it starts at 7:30. It's an arts mixer sponsored by the Village Arts Committee. The Soul Project will be playing. This is the band that played at the inauguration in January. All local musicians coming together, and it's part of our ongoing event activity through the Arts Committee to bring local musicians, local artists, bring people together to provide more artistic access and just really have a chance to really represent all the great artistic activity that's in Austining. Again, that's Saturday, April 9th, 7:30 at the Firehouse. Thanks.
Anyone else?
The Chamber is having an event on March the 30th, next Wednesday. It is called Increase Your Profitability Through Organized Barter. The cost for non-members is $25, and if you are a member, it is free, and it will be at the Briarcliff Manor Studio, Antipasta de Napolis in Briarcliff, 25 Studio Hill Road, Briarcliff.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Madam Clerk.
Okay. Village Board resolutions. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? No. Okay, letter A, resolution to award alternate bid items A and B from contract DPW-14-03. Resolved that pursuant to the authorizing provisions set forth in award of base bid amount of contract number DPW-14-03 cleaning, cement, motor lining, and replacement of water mains to J. Fletcher Creamer and Son Incorporated on May 20th, 2015. The Board of Trustees of the Village of Austining hereby now awards alternate bid item A of town contract proposal clean and rehabilitate 6-inch cast iron pipe on Hunter Street and related items for the amount bid of $352,663 and alternate bid item B of said contract proposal clean and rehabilitate 6-inch cast iron pipe on James Street and related items for the amount of $234,762 to J. Fletcher Creamery and Son Incorporated, 101 East Broadway, Hackensack, New Jersey, 07601, for a total additional award of $587,425 for said contract. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I would just say, I think you misspoke, and instead of saying said in the middle of the paragraph, you said town, but
Oh, did I say town?
but that's obviously not what you meant, so,
I'm sorry.
Madam Clerk.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Letter B, finance budget for water mains relining replacement capital project. Resolve water mains relining replacement capital project is modified in 2016 to reflect a developer contribution receivable revenue to pay for a portion of an ad alternate provision of the contract agreement with the project contractor as follows. These budget modifications are on file. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
On the board. Madam Clerk.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Do I have a motion to move into work session?
So move.
Second.
Madam Clerk.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Manager Zambrano.
Thank you, Mayor Garrity. Good evening. The agenda, as you mentioned before, is actually pretty full with mostly with housing items. And the first item on tonight's agenda is
averse to asking Chief Scarduzio
Oh,
to come
yes.
up first, so he doesn't-
Thank you, yes, yes. Thank you for reminding me, actually. We actually are going to go out of order. We have an item for the fire department. The fire department, as I had sent, communicated to the board, their air compressor that fills the oxygen tanks is no longer repairable, and it's quite old. So the fire chief has asked that the village board consider funding a new compressor, and he's actually going to talk to the board. I had also, earlier today, I had sent you an email from Treasurer Warren, who is suggesting that the board consider funding this through fund balance if you so agree to go through ahead with the purchase.
Right.
So,
So Chief, would you like to tell us a little more about the
Yes,
project you're
absolutely.
requesting?
Good evening, everybody.
evening?
Thank you for the time, and thank you for bringing this to the work session immediately. I'm asking to get this air compressor replaced immediately, as it is used for our needs every day. It is used to refill our air bottles after our calls. Without that, we have to send all our bottles out, and that's downtime if we send our bottles out. So it's a necessity to us. The existing machine that we have now, I did a little research. It was purchased in 1979. It's 37 years old. It was purchased when Charles Brundage was chief of the department. So we definitely got our time out of it. It's not repairable anymore. So it's definitely a necessity. So I want to thank you in advance for getting this done for us. Appreciate it.
How different is this from the air compressor that my husband has for tools?
Oh, totally different.
Okay.
This is actually
It's a different price
our,
point, so that's why I was asking.
4,500 our bottles are 4,500 psi, and it actually takes 4 of them, and it fills 4 bottles at one time. So it's completely different. It's a very big machine.
Okay, it must be.
Nothing compared.
Okay. Not like a pneumatic.
All right. So thank you very much.
Does the board want to have any questions? Yes, or comments?
Yeah, I would just mention that according to the treasurer's email to us, because we did well last year with the budget, and specifically the fire department budget, there's enough excess money that the fire department budget came back to the general fund to cover the cost of the compressor itself. So
I knew this was going to happen.
well, okay, well, careful about that. But anyway, but anyway,
Never actually say that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's not necessarily the best thing
No,
to say.
but it's a good reminder that you don't have to spend your budget. You shouldn't spend your budget.
I mean, the good news is that all the departments did very well in terms of staying under their budgets, and that allows us to have a rainy day fund. And in this case, we certainly need to buy this compressor for the department. So I would vote in favor to go forward.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments on this subject? Okay, then what do you need from us to
well,
move it
if you're
forward?
okay, then we'll bring a resolution to the next board meeting. We're going to go ahead, if the board doesn't mind, we're going to issue the purchase order so this where the procurement can start, and then we'll have an official transfer of the funding at the next legislative meeting.
Okay.
So this way we can officially move the money from fund balance to the operating budget. But right now, actually, the fire department has enough money still in the budget, so we can go through the purchase, and then we'll reimburse their individual accounts for the purchase. through fund.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the check wouldn't be issued until it's reviewed and approved anyway, but is the sense of the board that we're going to be approving this so that we can move forward with the paperwork?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The item that we have now before you is the new owners of the Snowden House are asking the board to consider extending the pilot agreement that exists with the current, that is currently in existence. The initial pilot was issued in 2006, and it was for a period of 20 years. And the request that has come in by the Standard Property Company, who's being represented today by Joseph Ouellette, who's going to come to the podium in a couple of minutes, actually, is for the village board to consider extending the pilot for another 15 or 20 years. But I think I'm going to let him speak on his behalf before the board, so.
Okay. So, Mr. Ouellette, would you join us, please? And if you wouldn't mind speaking into the microphone, we can hear you, but the purpose for the microphone is so the folks at home will be able to hear what you're saying.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks.
I have a presentation. Should
Sure.
call that up?
Do you have? Are you ready with that, Joe?
Do you have it with
We have it, but yes.
It's on. Oh, great.
Okay. Thank you to the board and the staff for having us this evening. As mentioned, my name is Joe Willett, and I am one of 3 principals partners at Standard Property Company. And today we are here to talk to you about our plans to purchase, rehabilitate, and preserve Stone House Apartments as affordable housing long-term. There, as was mentioned, there's an existing pilot that the project benefits from today that was done in 2006 that runs through 2026. Our request today is only to extend this pilot. At a minimum, we need it extended to the term of our preservation transaction, which will be 15 years from the day we close. In a perfect scenario, we would request 30 years, which would match with the long-term use and income restrictions that we'll be putting on the property subject to our low-income housing tax credit preservation transaction. So I know you've got a packed agenda tonight, so I'll try to be brief through this. The board has and staff has printouts of this presentation, but Standard Property Company is a national full-service multifamily real estate investment and management firm. We own over 30 communities around the country, 4,500 apartments in 6 states, serving working individuals, family, veterans, disabled citizens, and seniors. We specialize in acquiring, rehabbing, and preserving at-risk affordable housing. We're long-term owners. To that, we have over 45 years combined industry experience doing this. In the last 5 years alone, we've completed 11 separate low-income housing tax credit projects, preserving over 2,200 units and raising $250 million in debt and $100 million of low-income housing tax credit equity in the process. I myself am based out of Washington, D.C., but one of my partners is located in New York and in the city, and we have an office there. These next couple slides are just some examples of the type of work that we do around the country. We have completed the largest, this was actually Lakeside Village and the San Francisco Bay Area of California. It was the largest conversion of market rate to affordable housing in California history. And as you can see here, it was a large deal, $142 million in total project costs, significant rehabilitation, and $22 million. The big thing you can tell between our before and after pictures in this slide and the next project as well is the caliber of renovations that we do. That really sets us apart from a lot of the peers in our industry. As you can see here, we've done significant exterior improvements, and in the interior of the units, it looks and feels much like a market rate apartment with granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, and wood flooring. The next project, Lakeview House, this is outside of Washington, D.C. This is similar to Snowden House in terms of a big brick concrete structure, high-rise building. We completed a $50 million project here. Again, with the caliber of renovations, you can see granite countertops, wood flooring, stainless steel appliances. And all these projects that we do, we add significant amount of shared community space to the projects because we feel building communities in the projects that we own, since we're going to be long-term owners, is important to ensuring that our residents not only are comfortable where they live, but also are progressing up the ladder in life. The project Snowden House is at 35 Snowden Avenue in Ossining. It's 124 units of workforce affordable housing. Currently benefits from a project-based Section 8 contract that is set to expire actually April 1st. And the existing owner is only renewing that contract on a short-term basis. They are not willing or interested in making the types of long-term commitments to affordable housing that we do in our business model. The unit mix of the property ranges from 1 bedrooms to 4 bedrooms. It definitely has a very family-friendly higher bedroom unit mix count. The existing owners are second generation of the original developers, so the same family has owned and managed this project for 35 plus years. As you can imagine, with any project of that age, it has significant deferred maintenance and physical needs. It has definitely some functional obsolescence with its structural layout when it was built. 3 separate entrances to one building, which is very strange, and it definitely lacks in community space for the residents, which we hope to bring to the property with our program. The property currently serves an extremely low-income household, resident household base. The low-income housing tax credit project requires that you rent to folks earning at or below 60% of the AMI. As I mentioned before, this is not an existing tax credit project. That's what we plan to do. But it does benefit from a project-based Section 8 contract. And with that, these numbers are actually a little stale. 90% of the existing households that live at the project actually make at or below 50% of the area median income. 60% actually make below 30% of the area median income. So this serves a very low income and extremely low income community within your community. These are just some quick location maps. I'm pretty sure you folks are familiar with the project is in your community. These are some pictures of the existing conditions. You can see that it's definitely dated and tired in certain areas and needs work. Our plan is to purchase the project for $27.5 million. We entered in a purchase and sale contract with the seller back in December. The project was mass marketed across the country to folks that were interested in doing affordable housing preservation and potentially folks that were looking to do market rate conversion. They had 20 plus offers to purchase the property, and we were luckily selected after a series of best and finals to be the contract purchaser of the property. As I mentioned, our plan is to acquire, rehabilitate, and preserve it as affordable housing long-term. Long-term to us means 30 plus years. At closing, we're going to extend the project-based Section 8 contract for 20 years. We would go longer. HUD does not allow the contracts to be signed longer. We are using tax-exempt volume cap bond financing and non-competitive 4% low-income housing tax credit equity. We are not using any soft money or any contingent money from any funding source. These sources of capital are raised to the private markets once the IRS and the agency that can issue volume cap pledges the volume cap. Our project timeline is we hope to close in May, start construction there immediately after, and complete in the summer of 2007. Our plan consists of a $5 million renovation, which is $40,000 a unit. It's no new construction, and it's a tenant-in-place rehab of the existing improvements. We are going to completely overhaul the interior of the units, which means new kitchens, bathrooms, countertops, stainless steel appliances, granite countertops, new flooring, energy-efficient lighting, appliances, low-flow water fixtures and faucets. We're going to increase the community space of the building dramatically. We're going to bring the laundry room up to the first floor. We're going to make one centralized entrance facility with secured access, bring a new fitness center, new management office to the property. There's not currently an on-site management staff there, and also some additional systems upgrades. As I mentioned, this will be a tenant-in-place renovation, so we will work around the existing residents so they can continue to enjoy the benefit of their unit during renovation. I'm not sure I need to go into the affordable housing slide, given that tonight is a housing-focused agenda. But obviously, affordable housing is of significant need in your community. As you know, these slides just detail a lot of that, which I'm sure you have discussed in the past and you'll discuss again, so I'll move on. Community impact, this property serves those working in the local service, labor, and transportation and administration workforces, and those are workforces that are in generally low-paying yet highly localized, and they are in much need of local quality workforce affordable housing. We have hired a Westchester County-based architect and a Albany-based general contractor. We plan to hire contractors, laborers, subcontractors as much as feasibly possible in the Ossining community. Our contractor and architect and construction manager will do outreach in the community to ensure that qualified individuals have the opportunity to bid on our project and participate in the renovation. So again, in summary, why I'm here, the existing pilot of the project expires in 2026. We are making ourselves and our tax credit investor and our lender are making 15-year ownership commitments to this project. We are not real estate flippers. We will be in this community for 15 years if our project is improved. And because of that, we have to provide certain financial guarantees to our parties for low-income housing tax credit compliance, for the project-based HAP contract, and a number of other items. And because of that, our financial partners need certainty around the future of the real property taxes at the property through the duration of that commitment. So at a minimum, we're looking to extend the pilot, I guess it's 5 to 6 years, to 2032. We would like for you to consider extending it to 2046, which is 30 years from when we acquire the property, to match up with our our low-income housing use and income restrictions we're going to put on the property. But we, at a minimum, like I said, we need the term to match to the preservation transaction. And I think that kind of covers it. I know I talked pretty fast and got through it pretty quick, but I wanted to be conscientious of your guys' agenda tonight. So I'd love to take any questions that anybody, the staff or the board or in the community might have.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure that members of the board do have questions. I'll just begin with a general statement that there are a lot of ways to come at the housing concerns. And I'm really pleased that you were able to be part of this agenda, because what you're presenting us with is an opportunity to preserve the existing low-income housing, and truly low-income housing. We're not talking about moderate-income housing for the most part. And so I guess that was some of the questions that I know we had sort of talked about in anticipation. How do we exactly, and I believe that Trustee Basemore had an opportunity to speak with you in advance of the meeting, so perhaps he could enlighten us. But one of my primary concerns is it's a priority to us, at least to me, to be able to preserve the existing low-income housing that we have. And if we write the letter of support to the IDA expressing our desire to see your pilot extended, is there, and I guess this is a legal question, is there some caveat that can be included that there's a mechanism to preserve the low-income, very low-income element of the project in perpetuity or for as long as possible? That would be my priority if we were going to support it. I don't know. Is there a legal opinion you can give on that? Is there some sort of
There isn't a legal opinion I can give on that. I can tell you that in perpetuity would be next to impossible, but it's certainly they're looking at it for at least the next 15 years, and the intent certainly is there. So, and I would need to look at what was being offered. I haven't received the official application yet. I did get a call this week from John Lovelace, who's the counsel to the Westchester County IDEA. So I now have opened a line of communication with counsel at Westchester County. So I can take these kinds of questions back to him and certainly get back to you with definitive.
I can just speak to, from the project standpoint, and talking to the IDA, what we need to get to that May closing date is we're going to need a resolution from the village, the town, and the school board supporting whatever form or fashion of the pilot extension is commensurate with or each group is comfortable with. We need to get the feedback from all three bodies before we, I guess, decide to move forward in any certain direction with any group. Generally, everyone has been very supportive of the idea of extending it 5 or 6 years to match, with the 15-year commitment that we're making to own the property and preserve it as affordable housing. And I think others have expressed the same, I guess, concern that you raised, that if it's an additional commitment beyond that, what else comes with that? And, is that deed restrictions that actually run with the land for a certain period of time? And then what happens with the pilots? At the end of the initial 15-year period, is there a mechanism for, a new type of calculation? And I think we're open, as I mentioned to other members of the board before the meeting today, we are certainly open to discuss those options for that additional extension period of the pilot. We just want to make sure on a minimum so we can ensure that we actually, can get to the closing table and do what we say we're going to do in terms of rehabilitate and preserve this project, that at a minimum we can get that term out to I guess it's 2032. So 5 to 6 years extension off of what it is. And anything additionally that we want to talk about, we need to, I guess, see where the school board and the town is at on those issues.
I'm going to ask Trustee Basemore, do you want to chime in and fill us in on anything that might preempt some of our questions?
No, actually, as you said, I had a chance to speak with Joe earlier today, and I raised those questions about. For me personally, I'm definitely in support of the 6 year. That's something we're already doing now, and it'll be 6 more years to extend this project to for 15 more years. And as he already articulated, that I was very much interested in if we were to think about the extension of the 15 year to actually look at what that pilot could possibly be, because it would be different for the initial 15 years going forward. Like we said, okay, we're going to do it 15 more years. okay, this would be the new pilot, as well as I'm very interested in actually putting a deed restriction on the land, because one of the issues with the low-income tax credit properties is oftentimes what's happened in the past is after the 15 years is up, there would be like a term period where the developer could opt out, and then it could flip it over to market rate. I spoke to Joe earlier. I asked him, was he planning on waiving his term period? He said now, in order to get the low-income tax credit, that you have to go 30 years. So that was actually one of my concerns of how are you ensuring that we're going to have 30 years. So with the 6 years, we definitely have 30 years automatically if everything falls into place. And then if we choose to extend the pilot, a new pilot, for the remaining 15 years, I would definitely be interested in actually putting a deed restriction, because, again, as stated, we want to preserve it as long as possible and try to use what power we have locally to negotiate.
Yeah, I guess I want to understand the mechanism by which we can guarantee that the housing that's there will continue to serve those at kind of the lowest end of the economic scale. I mean, it doesn't sound. I'm just not sure how it works. I'm certainly in favor of this. I'm very, very happy that we didn't have somebody come in and want to make these market rate apartments. So I'm very, very much in favor of this and want to see it go forward to the extent that we can, keep this housing this way for as long as possible. In perpetuity is a word I would like to see, but I'm realistic. So, but I would want to understand the mechanisms that would make it attractive for you to move towards that and make that happen.
The longer commitment that we could negotiate on a pilot, the more open we are to deed restrictions on the property, and also a set mechanism for a recalculation of that pilot, when the next 15 years start. So, like I said, it's kind of a two-part agenda for us. We have to get the first,
Right.
the short-term extension done so we can make sure we actually get to closing and we can do everything we need to do. And then the second part, we are definitely willing to discuss if the school board is also interested in doing that, if the town is also interested. We have to make sure everybody's interests are in line there, because we don't want to negotiate something with the village that the school board is not on board with, or the town. But I think maybe step one is, we're supporting of, this pilot term, and then any additional extension, comes with additional considerations.
So if this board can do this and we can convince the other boards, we get that done, then you're saying, well, we can move right to the next thing?
I think so.
Okay. All right. I'm
we'd have to-
just laying it out here. I just want to understand
We'd have to get the
so-
term sheet so we can start to negotiate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
In exchange for the covenants and restrictions
I
you'd
think
need.
that's what I'm looking for. If we do this for you, then let's, make sure it gets extended. So I don't have any questions.
Joe, for the public, can you explain a little bit about the HAP program, and just explain how the HAP program works versus regular Section 8 and
Sure.
project-based
Yeah.
Section 8?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll explain two things. So with low-income housing tax credits, there's an income restriction at the property whereby individuals up to a certain income can live there. Once you exceed that income, or at least until you move in, if you're above that income, you can't live there. And rent is set upon that income restriction. With a project-based Section 8 program, essentially what that means is if a tenant agrees to pay $1,000 in rent to the landlord, and HUD, through their subsidy, tells that tenant, because you're a beneficiary of this subsidy that's at the project, you only have to pay 30% of your income in rent. And so say that means that individual can only pay $500 in rent on a monthly basis. What HUD does through the HAP program is they pay the difference between the landlord rent and the tenant paid portion of rent. So in that case, if the tenant can only pay $500, then HUD would pay the additional $500 to the landlord to make up the difference. And the difference between that and Section 8 vouchers that a lot of folks know about, Section 8 vouchers, an individual can pick up and take that voucher anywhere they want to go. So if they want to leave your community, they can take that voucher into another community. The project-based Section 8 means that this subsidy stays to the benefit of the project. So any new resident that moves into this project would benefit from this subsidy. So it keeps this subsidy and this benefit in your community.
And then if somebody, they move in, and at the time they move in, let's say they make $30,000 a year, but they get a new job, they finish school, their income goes up, then what happens to their access to this program?
So with the tax credit program, once you move in, once you get qualified, you're able to stay in the project as your income escalates to a certain level. I think it's 150% of the required AMI. So they would be able to continue to live there and benefit from the program.
Okay. They would just continue to spend 30% of their income. So their income, they might have been able to spend 500 at 30%. So it might go to 600 or 700 as if their income were able to advance as well. Okay. This side of the table, Rika?
Thank you for the presentation. I was actually in that town hall meeting last time that you did a presentation to the town. It was very interesting. It was different type of. Thank you. It was different type of questions that I would ask that evening. I do have, and I had a just brief moment with you early today in regards to how does that happen. And I guess that's the part one of if the boards, if the village board, the town board, and the school board agree to have to get this agreement done, because you're not the landlord just yet. You will have to, you say you need this pretty much all this paperwork done almost at the same time for this program. Now you did mention part two of this. When part two will be taking place?
So, I mean, a lot of this is between the lawyers to figure out. But it's my understanding, this is just our initial presentation, in this setting. Obviously, we've been here before, preliminary and meetings in the office. But at the next meeting, we hope that you introduce a resolution that says that we approve the extension of this pilot to Standard Property Company on the day they close the property, subject to the low-income housing tax credits, the taxes and bonds, their commitment to keep it affordable. So you would approve a resolution at your next meeting for the extension of the pilot with these conditions, and then the school board would do the same thing. The town would do the same thing. That then gets presented to the IDA, and the IDA can then work on drafting the actual pilot documents that we'll need in order to actually get to closing, in addition to the tax and bonds and the low-income housing tax credits. So
that's part one. So part two of this is the additional 15 years that we were talking about before. When will that take place?
I think if everybody is on board with the minimum extension that we've discussed, then, and you guys tell me the town and the school board is willing to talk about an additional 15 years as well with certain considerations, then I think it's a matter of having those negotiations with the attorneys and the administration and to figure out if there's a deal to be made there.
Well, just to make sure that the town and the school board will have to make their own decisions. We don't make decisions for them.
Right.
We can only make,
right.
Or at least I can only make a decision for this
right.
board. What John mentioned before, I'm not sure if convincing all the boards is the appropriate word for that. We can definitely show you the support for your project, and hopefully that will be an influence for them in any case.
Just to reiterate, I'm making the same presentation to everyone.
Yeah.
So again, we have to check box A to make sure we can get to closing, and then box B, if everybody's in agreement and we can figure out a deal that makes sense for everybody, then we are certainly open to doing that.
So now I have a couple random questions, I guess. There is 124 units on the complex, but you only referring to 123 units.
The project-based subsidy only benefits 123 units because when it was originally constructed, there was a manager unit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but you are going to have someone in staff there now, sure? That was part of the presentation?
Well, there's an existing staff person living there now. I'm not sure that the third-party management company that we hire will retain them or not. If they do not retain them and we don't elect to keep that as a staff unit, then it would be restricted to the tax credit maximum as well. It just wouldn't.
So that will be just that one unit
yeah,
that will not be
tenant
part of it.
The tenant would live there would just, unfortunately, not get the same subsidy benefit that everybody else lives there would get.
You say you had hired a local architect within, I'm assuming, New York. This is just like a really random question.
From the architect on the board.
No. What is it? Do you happen to know maybe now what is the minimum square footage that you have in a particular apartment, like the one-bedroom apartment? You know how big that is?
I know the average unit sizes. So I think the one bedrooms average 700 square feet, the two bedrooms average 800 square feet, and then the 3 and 4 bedrooms are large. They average 1,500 square feet and 1,600 square feet.
Actually, I have those numbers, I'm sorry, from the last pilot, and this, the one-bedroom apartments with one bath is 670. The two-bedroom, one bath, 830. Three-bedroom, two bath, 1,500, and the four-bedroom, two bath, 1,700 square feet.
The 3 and 4 bedrooms out there are really unique. There's a lot of actually interior duplex units, so
Yeah.
2 floors. And they're actually, it's 3 and 4 bedrooms, but they have a whole nother
House.
den area without
Bigger than
windows.
my house.
That's like a second
I know,
living
in my
room.
house.
So they're big units.
I'll be making an application. That's. I think it's a great project. Like I said, I spoke to you before. I think something that is interesting to see. And I'm definitely in favor of supporting this pilot. So, thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to say ditto to what everybody said and save some time, so thank you for coming. Just a question on the presentation. So the 40,000 per unit is, I'm assuming, an average per unit? Who's managing, this is a presentation of what you will be doing, but who's actually going to manage that the 5-something million will actually get done in the way that it's said? I mean, how does that happen?
The debt and equity lenders. We sign up that we're going to do that, and to get the tax exempt bonds and the tax credits, that we have to deliver on that.
So somebody's going to be managing that you will, in fact, be putting a certain quality and that every single apartment gets done and some sort of prescribed?
Yeah, I mean, we have different contracts with both the lender and the
And why is it that it's all about the apartments inside, but there's nothing in it about the outside, like parking and all the other stuff that goes in, or did I just miss that in the presentation?
We didn't get super specific into the scope of
okay.
renovation, but there's definitely some facade work that's going on. I think you saw in that one picture, there's definitely some water penetration issue in some portions of the building that needs to be addressed. We're doing some different stuff with the entrance to the building, and then, parking lot work that, and playground work, stuff outside. We just focused on, just chose to focus on the units in there.
Okay, so it's not a question of whether it needs to be done or not, you just gave the highlights and didn't include...
Just gave the highlights, yeah. I mean,
We're very focused on parking in this village.
Okay.
So I want to know if you're expanding parking, if you think there's a parking problem right now based on the number of people that are there.
Well, I don't think we could expand parking if we wanted to expand parking, and I can tell you from when I've been there, I mean, we don't have an official parking study, but there's plenty of available spots when I'm there during the day, and the few times I've been there in the evening. So I don't.
Well, it's a working person's place, so during the day, I'm assuming there will always be lots of parking, but you've been there in the evening and...
Yeah. But to the bigger point there, I'm not sure. So we're not going through a planning and zoning process because we're not adding any new buildings. It's all existing renovations.
Yeah, okay.
So we don't have the timeline, unfortunately, to do things like that. We
Parking
have
is
to-
just something we're keenly aware of for every project,
Yes.
so it's a question that will always
We will
come
be
up.
asking every person for the next 2 years that steps up to that microphone.
We're not taking any parking away.
Well, I wasn't hoping for that. I was hoping for the other way around, but okay. But thank you. This is great.
So, is there any directive that the board needs to provide as
Yes,
far
what
as
do we
next
need to
step?
do?
It sounds like
Need a resolution,
Lori Lee
right?
is waiting for some information,
we
the
waiting
term
for?
sheet.
Yes, once we have that, we can bring a resolution to the board, and then you will have to approve it, and then we can go from there, so.
Mr. Willett, do you have an attorney, or should I continue to discuss the matter with the IDA's attorney?
We do. We have Cuddy Fetter is representing us, Ken Jurist, and Bob Schneider.
Okay.
So I can make introductions
Yeah, I
as necessary.
had an email exchange with you yesterday when I had asked for some files. So maybe you could send me an email using that address.
Absolutely.
with
And they're
the-
just right up the street in White Plains.
Yes, I know the firm very well. Thank you.
Great,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Coming. Yep.
All right. I don't see Chuck Lesnick, so do we want to jump up to safe housing?
Thank you. The next item on today's agenda, actually, I see that Chuck Lesnick is not here, so we're going to skip that one, and we're going to go to safe housing. Initially, as the mayor mentioned before, Lynn Brooks Avenue was going to be presenting a quick summary of what the village is doing to be able to, as far as code enforcement and building inspections, so that we can address safe housing for all of our residents.
Yeah, Lynn and I have spoken about this a number of times. The whole board has met with Lynn. In fact, there's been a real focus. It's one of the top 3 priorities that this board has this year is how to effectively enforce our codes. And our approach is multi-pronged to take advantage of as many tools as we can and work with departments throughout the village. And I'd like to just show a quick video, if, Joe, if you could cue that up, and then from there we'll just, Lynn's not able to be here, we'll pick up on any further discussion on this topic when we do our part 2 of the housing agenda, but we will also hear from Corporation Counsel and Fire Chief Scarduzio on this topic after we watch the video. It's very brief. You may have seen it.
The audio cuts in and out.
Oh, you thought there was audio? There was audio. On this part?
It comes in and out, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's our computer?
No, actually,
No,
we-
it's the video.
Oh, I
Video, yeah, video itself.
I recall hearing it. Oh, there you go. This is a cool video, but not relevant to our discussion. Okay. That video had a really happy outcome. Everybody who was in that house got out safely. A couple people went to the hospital to have their CO levels checked, but everybody was okay. So that had a really happy ending, that our first responders were able to respond in time to get the people safely out of the home. You could go online and watch horribly tragic videos where there were unsafe housing conditions that did not end so well. And that's what we're trying very hard to avoid here in the community. And we have all heard from tenants who are living in substandard housing conditions, affordable housing advocates, community members at large, first responders, and everyone wants to see our community have safe housing and have our codes enforced to keep our residents safe, to keep our first responders safe, to keep our communities safe. That's the top priority. And as I said, our departments are working together to figure out how we can do this more effectively than we have been. Since we just saw this video, maybe Chief Scarduzio, would you mind just coming up for a moment? The fire department often gets into houses at, when there's a call to a property.
Just to bring everybody up to date, that one incident there was one evening. It was in an overcrowded residency on Croton Avenue. It did have a good outcome because nobody lost their lives that evening, but it was a CO incident with levels over 200 parts per million in the house. Thankfully, the little girl that the cops took out got sick. If she did not get sick, everybody when we went to sleep in that house, and it would have been a tragedy because nobody would have woke up the next morning because of the high levels. On the fire department end, we do respond to a lot of calls within this municipality. We do see overcrowding issues all the time. I commend you guys that you are trying to take the bull by the horns now and let's make something happen of this. I mean, we see it all the time on the fire department end. Like I said, with multiple calls that we go to, we see beds in kitchens. We see beds in closets. You know, they're not supposed to be like that. So as soon as we see something like that, we notify for our building department to respond out immediately. Once the building department comes, we do turn the scene over to the building department, and then they take it from there. But it definitely is an issue within this municipality. And I commend you, whatever can be done. I mean, coming from the fire department and the chief here, we do notify, and we don't like seeing stuff like that, ever. So
Thank you.
it's just a matter of time before. We haven't had a tragedy yet, but it's only a matter of time before it does happen. So if it can be prevented, God bless. Hats off to everybody. So
Thank you.
thanks.
Corporation Counsel, did you want to speak to the legal department's efforts here? and
Sure.
concerns?
Sure. As the board is aware, we've had regular meetings with the code enforcement individuals and the Deputy Corporation Counsel for Prosecution. We're looking at certainly every option to tighten up the code provisions and to be sure that regular inspections are being made in accordance with uniform state codes. There's a opportunity for us to do fire inspections on a regular basis, and I understand that those efforts are being stepped up at the code enforcement level, which is really good to hear. Also, we're looking at the current round of information coming out of the town's efforts for reevaluation, where it's bringing to light a lot of issues in terms of the findings, and we're comparing it against the documents that we have in the building department itself. So that's been a valuable exercise, and we're systematically taking the time to get the, for want of a better word, the low-hanging fruit. We're looking for the most egregious and starting there and working backwards. Every complaint that's called in to the code enforcement department, the building department, is acted upon. Every complaint. So if you have information, and you can be assured that if you call and provide that information to the code enforcement department, that there'll be follow-up to the best of their ability. They'll be following up on complaints called in. We do have constraints, as you know, under the United States Constitution, Article 4. There's a search and seizure requirements, and there's a 200 years of litigation involved with that. So we are systematically looking at ways to collect evidence to get to the level of probable cause to get a search warrant. We're bringing those applications starting very soon, bringing the applications forward, and with the assistance of judges who will sign those search warrants, we'll be getting access to the most egregious situations and moving through the list as we can do it. So I just wanted to assure the board that we're working closely with Lynn Brooks-Ovney and her staff, and Deputy Corporation Counsel Bill Hamilton is also dedicated to the cause. So we stand by it, and we push it as far as we can push it. As you know, certain items have been litigated. For example, multiple mailboxes on the side of a house doesn't rise alone to the level of probable cause. So I know often people are pointing out, I see this, I see that, I see this, but the more information we have pertaining to a particular property, the better off we are in terms of rising to the level of probable cause to get in for an inspection.
And I understand having unbiased data that points to, that is an indicator that there might be overcrowded housing. That's the type of information
It
that
is
can be
true.
helpful to gaining access to a property,
Right,
such as data perhaps from the assessment.
Correct. The collection efforts of Tyler will benefit us because they are third-party, unbiased evidence of situations, personal observations of situations. The other data, as you know, we recently undertook was a water study, which will also be beneficial. We know what average water usage is for a single-family house, and if you see spikes, there's, and we're looking into whether there are leaks and active leaks, and if there are no active leaks, and that also goes into the file. And once you get a a bucket of information that rises to the level of probable cause, we can get a search warrant and we can go in and assist the occupants to be sure that they're safe.
Of course, please.
Thank you. Just to touch base on that call that was that incident that was just presented, I did leave out one important factor. That night, 12 people were transported to the hospital that evening, and all 12 people resided in that single-family home. That was a major point that I did leave out. So thank you.
Yeah, and I know. I also would like to just mention that the reason that there were no O2 detectors that were operational within the building.
There was none. There was none found in the residence at all.
So just from a safety perspective, it's very important, and I know that the fire department talks about this all the time. It's very important that you have O2 and smoke detectors, properly placed and properly installed in your home. It is the law, and also it's for your safety. These types of incidents, the individuals that were taken from that home, I mean, they weren't even aware that they were overcome by the gas. Okay, you don't even know that it's happening. So if you're seeing this now, you better make sure you've got those detectors in your home, because it's going to be, it means the safety of your family. And I'm sure that the chief would echo that, but it's something that's really important that everybody be educated about that.
I definitely echo that, and it's the law. And in New York State, they just passed a 10-year law on all smoke detectors. So that was just passed recently. And the only reason why they found out the CO that night is thankfully at OVAC on their medic bags, they have actual CO detectors on there, and that's what alerted them of the incident. That's all I have. Thank you.
Corporation Counsel, so when incidents such as the video happen, what kind of response do you get from the the landlord or the owner of the house? Like, are there any legal?
As Chief Scarduzio explained, and the police will also explain, there's an automatic call-out that occurs to the on-call individual from the code enforcement. Violation notices are written, orders to remedy are written immediately before the inspection is finished. Those orders to remedy can be issued, and the individual property owners are brought to court to bring the property up to code. At a minimum, the safety standards, and they have to legalize that which can be legalized. In some cases, bedrooms are not permitted in a closet, so that could never be a legalized situation. That just simply is a vacate situation, and then follow-up inspections are done from there.
So, a follow-up question. I know there might be like a state law with livable space. In the case where livable space was like 12 people, they didn't have enough space, then how do you remedy that? Like 12 people living in a single family house, even though they don't have enough livable space according to New York State law.
That's correct. The individuals had to vacate, immediately. There's no leeway given on that. If it's an unsafe condition, it's an unsafe condition. And unfortunately, the tenants or the property owners who are overcrowding need to leave the premises right away. They're not allowed back in.
Which is part of why this is such a challenging issue to address.
It is a challenge. It's a heartache to see families in need of housing on the street because of actions or inactions by the property owners. In this case, it was for want of a simple carbon monoxide detector and smoke alarms, and it's important. It's important. I think they sell carbon monoxide detectors at the CVS. I mean, it's that simple, so there's no excuse for it.
Okay. Are there any further comments or questions on this subject? All right, then.
Can I ask a question, please?
No, I'm sorry. This isn't a public comment section. This is. And I see that Chuck Lesnick has arrived. So.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief.
This evening, the next topic on the agenda is going to be the ETPA program discussion for the board. I know that there is the Emergency Tenant Protection Act of 1974 was established to be able to provide rent stabilization in various municipalities, and it applies to buildings that were built before January 1st of 1974. So the idea here is for the village board perhaps to consider adopting local legislation that will then, the village of Austining will join the ETPA program and giving some benefits to some of the residents of the village who will qualify under the program. So with that, we have invited Chuck Lesnick, who is the Office of Rent Administration in Westchester County. So with that, Mr. Lesnick. So.
Thank you, Abe. Thank you, Mayor. Good
Welcome.
to see you all. So I don't know if you want me to just give a little bit of an overview, and then you can
That would be
answer
helpful.
questions. So you probably have a lot of the fact sheets that I sent around, and just in case you don't, I made additional copies of them, which I will send around right now.
Link?
I don't know. Let me see if I
Was it
have
a
all
link?
the
Or
way.
was it a document? And,
What?
Did we have this?
No, it just came through, I think, today.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So rent control was created in 1947 to prevent price gouging from returning GIs coming back from fighting in World War II to, that's not my car that's beeping, is it? I hope not.
Now it's no more cars.
What? Yeah.
Does anybody have keys they want to check and make sure it's not their alarm that's going off? Okay, very good.
Stopped.
Great.
Somebody-
All right.
So it either was or it wasn't. And rent control existed in different municipalities throughout the state of New York for many years. In 1974, they consolidated them all with rent control and rent stabilization. And in areas outside of New York City, it's widely known as ETPA, the Emergency Tenant Protection Act of 1974. And at the time they created ETPA, there was a big debate in the state legislature whether this was going to encourage or discourage new construction. So they said it will only apply to buildings built prior to 1974. So that's why it's sort of quirky, but that's why ETPA only applies to buildings built prior to 1974. There's some stuff in the materials I sent out about rent control and rent stabilization. You don't have to worry about rent control. In fact, I crossed it out with a big black X because you don't have to worry about the MDR. It's not what you're concerned about. So what if Austining were to consider ETPA, and here's another thing I'm going to pass around, which is the legislation that was set by the state. You would have to do a survey of sorts and determine that the vacancy rate in the village of Austining is under 5%. Now, you could either do a 5% of all the rental housing, or you could do 5% of the class of the housing that you're seeking to regulate. The state minimum is 6 units or more, but other places have gone 10 units or more. Croton actually went in at 20 units or more because they were concerned particularly about one building, and that's what they wanted to focus on, that one building, and they went in at 20 units or more. Most of the municipalities in Westchester, Nassau, and Rockland are at 6 units or more. Now, I don't know if you've done a survey yet of how many buildings that would apply here. And it would only apply to buildings that are privately owned. It would not apply to buildings that are owned by a housing authority. It would not apply to buildings owned by a not-for-profit. For instance, if you had West Hab or West Help or any of those units. And even in a privately owned building, if one of these service providers is renting a unit and making it available for other people to come in and come out. Let's say it's a homeless prevention program like CHI offers. It wouldn't apply to those units as well. So it only would apply. Now, what would happen is that if the village board were to pass the legislation, we would then go out and establish the base rents. The base rents are the current rents. They're the rents that are being charged right now. You don't go back to 74. You just look at it right now. Yeah, I'm looking at myself, Abe. I don't know if it's...
I'm parked over there, so.
We can just look through the
Try that
window.
one, but it's a black Subaru, but I don't know. So what then happens is every year the Westchester Rent Guidelines Board meets, and they always meet in June, and they hear public testimony. And we, the state of New York, as part of our commitment to the program, we have a research unit. Guy Alba heads it up, and they are sending out surveys right now to the building owners, and the building owners are reporting on 10 units of cost, whether it's the fuel or the water bills or the tax bills, whatever it is that they do to construct costs, and they will make a presentation to the Rent Guidelines Board. And I think we open on June 1st in Yonkers. Then we have a public hearing in Mount Vernon. Then we have one in White Plains. We come back in White Plains. There's testimony back and forth. The Rent Guidelines Board is appointed by the County Board of Legislators. There are 9 members, 2 tenant reps, 2 landlord reps, and 5 public reps. It's usually those 5 public reps that wind up making the recommendation for what the rent guidelines shall be. In the material that I handed out, you will see that the past history of the rent increases in Westchester County, and I believe that's in the second fact sheet. No, it's in the third fact sheet on page 3 of 5, and you can see that one year it was 2.5% or 4. One year it was 1.25% or 2.5. One year it was 3% or 4. What we tend to do is we offer a rent increase for a 1-year lease and a rent increase for a 2-year lease. And it's based on the economy of the year. It's based on the fuel costs of the year. It's based on the testimony. There was 1 year that Westchester had a 0% increase. Hasn't been that way for like 10, 15 years. New York City did a 0% increase last year, but that's certainly within the realm of the board to do. The other thing we do, and I'm joined here, by the way, by Simone Marie Meeks, who's our assistant commissioner. We have a whole infrastructure at Gertz Plaza, where she works, about 350 employees who handle rent complaints, service overcharges. So by signing on to ETPA, we're there to sort of back up, and we're a quasi-judicial agency. We don't always side with the tenants. We don't always side with the landlords. We also approve something called an MCI, which is a major capital improvement. So if the landlord does put money into improving the building, whether it be a new boiler or new windows or new roof, whatever it is, he or she can recoup some of those investments. Now, we also have a couple of other programs that I've talked throughout the county about, and you may be familiar with, and one of them is SCREE, and the other one is DREE. SCREE is the Senior Citizen Rent Increase Exemption. DREE is the Disabled Rent Increase Exemption. And in both of those cases, if you are a senior, 62 or above, or disabled, and paying more than a third of your income in rent. That's the only part of our program that's really means tested. The rest of our program is not means tested. And you make under a certain dollar amount, and that certain dollar amount can range from $16,500, which the Mamaroneck uses, to $50,000, which New York City, Yonkers, Hastings, Irvington, some of the other municipalities in Westchester County use, or something in between. You pick that out as a village. In those cases, the tenant does not have to pay the increase, either the increase approved by the Rent Guidelines Board or the MCI, the Major Capital Improvement. But in turn, the municipality has to give a tax abatement to the property owner equal to the abated rent. So let's say, for instance, you have a senior who's been there for a long time. She's living in a studio. She's paying $800 a month rent. The increase is 1.5% for that year. It would go up from $800 to $820. That $20 a month rent times 12, $240, is the abatement that the municipality would offer to the landlord in return for not raising that woman's rent. Now, in year 1, that's what it's going to be. In year 2, because it's a 2-year lease, it's going to be the same thing. In year 3, however, you might have a 2% increase. So now you're talking about maybe another $300 on top of the $240. We have in all of the state of New York, over 1 million tenants who are beneficiaries of either rent control, rent stabilization. 900 and some odd change thousand are in New York City. In Westchester, Rockland, and Nassau, there are approximately 35 to 40,000 tenants. And of those, approximately 414 of them are on scree or dree. So you're talking about 1% of all the tenants in Westchester, Rockland, and Nassau that take advantage of it. In New York City, where they promote the heck out of this program, and they really want to help the seniors and the disabled, it's 10%. That's the maximum you could ever hope to achieve. In Westchester, I'll be honest, a lot of people are saying, well, we have a 2% property tax cap. How are we going to afford this? This is money that, we can't spend on other worthy programs. So even those municipalities that pass scree and dree don't always promote it. Sometimes it's just there for the people who apply for it. Yonkers and Mount Vernon's are exceptions. They promote it as well, but some of the other municipalities sort of keep it to themselves. A few people know about it, and that's who uses it. But you can only do scree and dree if you are on ETPA. And I notice you're looking at right now the list of the maximum income caps for different municipalities in Westchester County. Again, that's a separate decision that you would make. If the board is so inclined to take this to the next step, you would have to do some sort of survey to determine what the vacancy rate is. And, that could be as simple as getting an inventory of all the existing buildings in the municipality that fit the criteria you're looking for, whether it's 6 units or 10 units or above, and doing a door-to-door survey, looking at the mailboxes, looking at the Con Ed rolls, looking at the voter registration, determining what the vacancy rate is, or it could be looking at the ads in the newspaper to see, okay, there are 7 ads this week, there are 5 ads next week, and if we have a pool of, let's say, 300 units of housing and we're only getting 5 ads, then you could be pretty certain that the vacancy rate is probably going to be less than 5%. There are different ways to do it. There's a whole line of court cases that uphold different standards or not. But really, the board has to make a policy decision first as to whether or not they want to have ETPA, and then we can get in the weeds about the logistics. So I'll take questions.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that there's a lot to figure out here. So does anybody want to kick us off? Go ahead, John.
You mentioned that in Westchester County, you mentioned it's the scree and the dree.
Yes.
And you said there are about 400 or so participants, you said?
414 in Westchester, Rockland, and Nassau total out of roughly 40,000. So you're talking about 1% of all the people that are on ETPA take advantage of scree and dree.
Yeah. Can you tell me what the financial impact there is to taxes?
Sure. I mean,
in other words, you mentioned obviously, like you gave us an example, but do you have a number like for those 1,414 individuals?
Well,
I mean, what's the tax impact?
I will say that 220 of them are in the city of Yonkers.
Okay.
And I think the impact is like $40,000 or $50,000 in a municipal budget that's close to $1 billion. So, the impact is not that great. The last municipality that increased scree and dree was Irvington, and they were worried about the floodgates that were going to open. And one woman, Mrs. Paul, she's 92 years old, she came forward, she applied. She was the reason they did it, and so far she's the only one that signed up. I have been keeping a running total, and I think I have it in my bag, of the different municipalities in the last year and a half that have increased their limits because of the new state limits. And again, I think we've seen about 32 new applications come in. And, again, if Ossining were to do this tomorrow, the first year that you'd see any impact on scree and dree would be the following year. And if 2 or 3 people took advantage of scree or dree, in my example, you're talking about $240, maybe $300. You're probably going to be less than $1,000 for your impact. Another fee, by the way, is that we, the state, charge the municipality $10 per unit for the bureaucratic task of administering the program, and that is a fee you're allowed to pass on to the property owners, and that's in state statute. So that fee has not been changed since 1974, so it's only $10 a unit. It's really, we're undercharging people, but that's what it is. So that's a wash in terms of cost to the municipality.
Others with questions?
Yeah, so for the SCREE, what is the typical senior that would apply for that? Like, is this someone in a senior housing complex? Is
No.
it someone?
If they're in a senior housing complex, they're probably subsidized already. So if they're in, let's say, municipal housing authority, or if, and by the way, if they have a Section 8 certificate, they're not going to apply to us either. So the typical senior or disabled person who applies is somebody who is living in private housing, in a building that's 6 or more units, that's regulated by ETPA, and they're making enough. Let's put it this way: if you're making $36,000 a year, that's $12,000 for a third of your income would be having to go to rent. $12,000 divided by 12 would be $1,000. So they would have to be paying more than $1,000 in rent and making less than $36,000 a year. Again, if the rent is $12,000, they could be making $40,000 a year. The maximum income cap is $50,000. But some of these people, I had somebody call my office today from Freeport. She's making $16,700 with her husband. You know, it's Social Security and a tiny little pension. That's what they're making. And it's all household income too. And that's what also happens. Sometimes you'll find, like we had a woman who became ineligible because her son came back from college and was living with her for a while. So his income counts to her income. So she was off, but then she was back on again when he moved out.
Hi. So I have a question. It's all based on income, not on assets?
For the SCREE and the DRE, it is. For just
Because you're dealing with seniors, so there are seniors who
Yeah.
really are not working, but they might have large assets,
Right,
but
well,
not an income.
You know, again, if you're 72 or above, I think the federal government requires you to take your IRA and that sort of stuff. You know, I have people all the time. There was a woman who called me up 2 days ago from Yonkers, and she was a teacher. You know, her pension is like $80,000, and it was like we had a very brief conversation, and she thanked me and said, "For better or for worse, I'm not eligible," and goodbye on that one.
And the landlords, so this is, the owners have to agree.
The owners are neutral. The owners don't have to agree. The owners are forced to take this. And in fact, in Westchester, you have source of income discrimination legislation, so they couldn't care where it's coming from. So instead of getting, in my example, $820, they're going to get $800, and then they're going to get a $240 abatement from the municipality. So they're indifferent as to whether it's SCREE and DRE. And in fact, Simone and I were just at a meeting with owners a couple of days ago in White Plains at the Crown Plaza, and the owners, asked us to do a better job of promoting SCREE and DRE because they'd like to help their tenants out. They would like to, not have the tenants complain when the rents go up, and if they're getting SCREE or DRE, they don't.
Or another way of saying it, they want to get more rents from other people and move these people out?
It's all regulated, and
Like, who the parties are here.
okay. So what happens?
Rika, you have to turn your microphone on, and you have to talk into it.
So what?
To actually just understand, like, who the parties are involved in this chain of events.
So what-
I think I get the municipality part, but I don't
So
understand
what
the
happens with
others.
ETPA, and ETPA is a wonderful thing because it requires some uniformity, it requires some legalness. And, sometimes you have these tenants and, bless their heart, they've been dealing with the same people for 30 years. They don't have leases, they don't always have written things, they get cash and things like that. When you're under ETPA, you have to provide a contract, a lease, every year. You have to send it out 120 days in advance. The tenant has a certain time that he has to return it back to you. It has to be in writing. You have to offer the tenant a choice between a 1-year lease and a 2-year lease, and you have to give them the increase, and the increase can only be what the Rent Guidelines Board says it can be. So if it's 1.5%, that's what the increase is going to be. So if you were to adopt ETPA now, there'd be a public hearing period. It would probably take you, 30 to 60 days to sort of get it queued up. But from that point on, the leases would all be under this statute. Now, when the Rent Guidelines Board meets in June, they'll determine what that increase is. That increase is effective from April 1 through September 30th of the following year. Not everybody's lease runs October 1 to September 30th. So whenever the lease comes up, whether it's February, December, June, whatever it is, it comes up, they have to send out the lease. What's nice is if there's a service complaint, let's say somebody's complaining about the landlord. I know you have an entity in Ossining that's supposed to mediate disputes between landlords and tenants. But now all of a sudden you have a state agency that does that. So the landlord can complain to the state about a particular tenant. More often than not, it's the tenant that complains about the landlord. The landlord then documents what he's doing. The tenant documents what's been happening. Sometimes there's an inspection and there's an adjudication. And if either party is not happy with the adjudication, they can bring an Article 78, they can go to court. They always have the rights they have in landlord-tenant court. We don't change those rights, but usually what happens if they get to landlord-tenant court and somebody says, we've complained to HCR and they're working this out, the judge will usually put it on hold. So again, there's, I guess, a relief on your court system, which you're paying for locally, because some of these disputes are now going to be heard by the state agency.
And just to clarify, that would only be in the buildings that would be eligible under the ETPA program.
Exactly. Do you have any sense for how many buildings are eligible?
Actually, I got an email from Lynn's. Dennis Hanratty's been here before, so it'll be approximately about a dozen or so buildings.
A dozen, and how many units in those buildings?
That we don't know. It could be 6 units. It could be 125 units. So we don't have a good sense at this point of how large.
I'm sure, since you guys all go door to door, that you would know if there are buildings that have 125 units in town.
There are
in village.
But we don't know if they when they were built.
74.
Yeah. So it's yeah.
But just to be clear, so any kind of like non-for-profits who own buildings wouldn't fall under. Okay.
No.
So it sounds like. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's ask some more questions for the next
that
steps.
was actually, it wasn't a question to you directly, but it was a question for the board itself. Is like, and to our staff, is like, we need to figure it out. We need to figure out actually what we have in our village, and I don't want to say make a decision at that point, but actually start getting all the facts together and just go from there. So I guess within this week, next week, I guess, in a couple of weeks, we'll start the process.
Yeah.
And then we go from there. I mean, yeah.
It has to be less than 5%.
Less than 5%, correct, yes.
Hold on, John.
Okay,
Did
so
you
we
have a
didn't have
question or
any
comment on Ready TPA?
No, my questions are pretty much answered at this point. I think we need to do a little discovery, exercise here to understand eligible buildings and get a little more detail into it.
So the concept of a housing needs assessment has been raised. It has not been fleshed out. We haven't investigated it. Is the information that would be needed to find out vacancy rates for the similar type of building that would be covered in ETPA, as you described it, which we don't have the details on, and I'm sure you could provide it if we go forward with that. Is that something that is simpler than a full-blown housing needs assessment?
Sure. Because if you're telling me there are only a dozen buildings, how hard is it to figure out what the vacancy rate is in a dozen buildings as opposed to in the entire village? You could do a housing needs assessment and figure out in the whole village, and that would certainly have credibility and standing, and that would be a valid report. But you don't have to go that far. You could just look at the class of buildings that you're seeking to regulate.
And what sort of resources would be needed to do what's required to be able to identify the vacancy rate in those dozen buildings? Is that something are there outside agencies that do that and they charge an expected amount that we can anticipate? Like, what sort of investment would be needed to move forward to that step so we can have a better sense of the
That's a really
potential?
good question. I suspect that in 1974 and 1984, when most of the villages joined, or the municipalities, they probably did it in-house themselves. But you could go to Housing Action Council, Westchester Residential Opportunities, Community Housing Initiatives, any of those groups, I'm sure,
Okay.
and do something like that. It would be
So
It's just, yeah, there's a little less
Well,
fluff
ju-
in,
just simply
in village
what's-
government these days.
What's the last municipality
I was
that
gonna
did
ask.
this? Oh.
I think
I
it
was
was
just gonna
Croton.
ask that question.
Croton did actually.
When?
They did the just before I came here. No, actually, I think it might have been adopted in maybe June or July of 2015.
All right,
that was
so
that was
that's
the
that.
work. So
How
So
they did it.
20
But they did it for like one building.
yeah, they did it.
20,
Yeah, it
20
was-
I'm
exactly.
sorry, just to modify what Abe said, Croton entered Scree and Dree for the first time.
Oh.
But you had entered ETPA
in the 80s.
in the 80s.
Oh, in
yeah.
the 80s.
Oh, so they were still, that's still the most recent though?
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Okay.
So,
We're kind of excited about it because there are a number of municipalities like Peekskill that have thought about it. If you look at the list, most of the municipalities are south of 287, and it's the municipalities that you would think about it. Interestingly, Mary Marvin from Bronxville was very intrigued that you guys are looking at this again because she too wants to do Scree and Dree in Bronxville, and Bronxville doesn't have it. So they may think about it as well. So you may be
wildly different municipalities.
Yes,
considering
I was
Yes.
going to say not a surprise, but okay. And I assume it's a lot of cities. It's an urban thing a little bit more, but I see a pretty good list there.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
the
but
last
even
one's 1980s, so
even places like Scarsdale are starting to realize that some of their seniors can't live in the apartments that they have, and oh, and by the way, there are these vacancy decontrol sorts of things. You probably read about it last year when the state budget was being passed, and if a unit is roughly $2,700, and actually it's better defined in the text that I sent you because it's $2,700 multiplied by whatever the Rent Guidelines Board increase is. So in Westchester, you're actually a little bit higher because the increase was last year. If that unit is vacant, or in the case of establishing your first base rent, if it's over $2,700, then that unit will be out because of luxury decontrol. That was one of the Pataki initiatives when he was trying to sort of gut rent regulations slowly, which is why we went from $1.5 million to less than $1 million of rent-regulated housing. There is a situation where if the tenant is in place and has an income of more than $200,000, you can also get them out with luxury decontrol. But that doesn't happen very often because.
it's rent decontrol rather than control. Wow,
Well, that's in situations where you already have ETPA
Right, no, I
and
understand.
you already have rent regulation. But the idea here is that Ossining is coming back. More and more people want to live here, and there's a lot of pressure on the people to stay here. So while you can't fix everything with ETPA, you can at least address those dozen buildings in the class and provide affordable opportunities for a couple hundred families who might not otherwise be able to stay in the village that they've lived so long.
okay, so it sounds like the next step for us is to confirm what buildings it is and then look into what it would mean to do the vacancy study. And then we need to figure out what that means from a numbers standpoint as far as what the financial burden would be. If we did have a lot of people who decided to participate in Scree and Dree, and are there other financial implications for the village other than Scree and Dree that directly affect our?
Nope, that's
Okay,
it.
That's it.
The
But it's a
annual-
cumulative yearly
correct.
commitment. It's not like you do it for a year or two and then
No,
it's
you-
out.
I mean-
It's a long-term commitment.
Correct.
It's cumulative, right? So it's sort
Yeah,
of
it builds
future
over time.
value
It's
of
out.
the money.
Correct.
Right.
I
Right.
couldn't hear you. What?
Only within the buildings that fall under.
Yeah,
ECP.
no, no.
So
Only
there'll
within,
never be like a
within
13.
units, yeah.
No, no,
within
no.
the
Of
units.
course not.
While
Listen,
it's
out of
been-
the 12, it may only be 2 buildings. We don't know yet until we do it. So.
While it's been since the 1980s since we added a village, it's also probably been since that long since we've taken away a village. And to take away a village, for a village to be an ETPA and opt out, they would pretty much have to do a study to show that the vacancy rate was no longer 5%, or they could just decide that they were going to change the limits from 6 units to 10 units to 20 units, or whatever it is. So it isn't permanent. I mean, a subsequent village board could come along and not do it. But what typically happens is people get used to it, and especially the tenants that are taking advantage of it become a vocal
voice.
Yes, and those
protecting
people would never be reelected. So once it's in, it's in.
So I'm pretty sure this is permanent.
The only other cost, as you know, as Ms. Lesnick mentioned, is actually the annual ETPA registration, $10 per unit. So
Yeah.
Which you could
that's-
pass on to the property
right,
owners.
correct. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Somebody's paying for it.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be out of our
Right,
general
out of
fund.
the-
Right, correct.
Okay. All right, any final questions for Mr. Lesnick? All right, well,
Thanks. You all have my email, and I know many of you have sent me notes in the past, and I will try to get back within 24 hours to anybody.
thank you. Thanks for coming.
Bye-bye.
Okay, moving right along.
Thank you, Mayor. The next topic is the Village Affordable Housing Program, and as we all know, I mean, affordable housing is a topic that the Village Board is certainly concerned about and has continued to work on over the years. We have local legislation that, in fact, requires that any development in the village set aside 10% to affordable housing, and we actually I know that the village, the new planner, is in fact making sure that anytime any proposed developments come before the planning department, that the appropriate set asides are actually communicated to the potential developers. So actually tonight we have a few things, and one of the things that I want to preempt also, you know, the presentations is the fact that right now we have 26 affordable housing units at the village managers. Out of those, 17 are Avalon, and the other ones are dispersed throughout all the smaller buildings in the village. And the building department actually, the new planner works, and IFCA actually manages the yellow certifications and helps the village along to make sure that those units remain affordable for the people that are actually living there. So it's something, again, that the village takes very seriously, and we will continue to do so in the future, so.
Okay, I was going to invite CVH up before Karen. Okay.
I just-
Yes.
Do we know whether those 17 units at the Avalon are leased up, or do we
There's
have any?
actually, right now, of the units that are there, there's one that is not, that is available right now. And in fact, I know that our director of Section 8 is working with Avalon, because that is one of the Section 8 units that I believe that's available, if I remember correctly. So, right, one of the units that's available is a Section 8 unit or not at Avalon?
I don't think there's such a thing as a Section 8 unit,
Sorry.
but
Okay, I'm sorry. So, all right.
but it does seem likely that Section 8 would be trying to fill the space, but to find an eligible
But there
tenant.
is, one available unit right now that hasn't been rented, so.
Okay, and so with that, I would like to welcome a representative from CVH, which is Community Voices Heard, to address the board, to tell us about, I believe, an affordable housing committee. There are affordable housing committees that exist in other communities around Westchester, and as we approach how we can do a better job, more effectively providing housing for our community, we're looking at what our options are to be able to understand where we are right now and where we want to go in the future. And I'll speak more to that and in this meeting and to the next meeting, but for right now, I'd like to turn it over.
Okay, first of all, I have copies of letters to pass out to you.
Okay? It's okay, we can share if necessary.
Okay, good evening. My name is Nicola Kenny. I'm a homeless Ossining resident and a Community Voices Heard Power member, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the 60% of Ossining households who pay over a third of their income on rent. Thank you for including us on the agenda to speak this evening. At the Village Board meeting on February 17th, 2016, 30 CVH members came and presented on the need to form an affordable housing committee in the village of Ossining. After 2 follow-up conversations with Trustee Codman and Trustee Bazemore, we've been invited here tonight to present on what an affordable housing committee is, what it would be responsible for, what it would look like, and why we think it would be helpful in making progress on the need for low-income and affordable housing in the village. First, what is an affordable housing committee? An affordable housing committees come in various configurations, depending on the needs of each municipality. In general, it is a group of affordable housing stakeholders who are convened by the municipality to conduct research and make recommendations to increase the development and preservation of affordable housing at the local level. Affordable housing committees include everyday concerned citizens who volunteer their time to be on the committee. They also include professional affordable housing advocates, nonprofit developers, and private affordable housing developers. There are over 9 affordable housing committees currently active in Westchester County, including at the village level in places such as Croton, Yorktown, Hastings-on-Hudson, and Irvington. While most of the existing committees are in higher income communities than Ossining, we know that the housing need in Ossining warrants such a committee, and that there is enough flexibility in this model to enable Ossining to create a committee that is right for Ossining. What would the Affordable Housing Committee be responsible for? In our conversations with concerned residents and with trustees Bazemore and Codman, we developed a number of objectives that we are putting forward for the Affordable Housing Committee in Ossining. The objectives are as follows: conduct research on housing needs in Ossining and on best practices to further low-income affordable housing preservation and development. Develop short, mid, and long-term recommendations to the village board regarding affordable housing development and preservation. Conduct community education to help foster support and understanding of low-income affordable housing throughout the village. Review housing development deals and use of the Affordable Housing Fund. And lastly, identify emergency housing resources for people who have been displaced by code enforcement efforts. Next, what would the Affordable Housing Committee look like? We are recommending that the Affordable Housing Committee be created through an expansion of the Landlord-Tenant Council. This would require the council to be renamed to represent this expanded role, and for an additional 3 to 5 seats to be added. As stakeholders, we are calling for one of those seats to be held by a Community Voices Heard leader to ensure that the voices of people directly impacted by the housing crisis are represented in this committee. Lastly, why do we think this would be impactful? An Affordable Housing Committee will help increase the village's capacity to research and develop recommendations to address pressing housing needs. It will create an additional layer of democratic participation and transparency in the process of creating and implementing affordable housing policy. As residents, we urgently feel the need for action in the midst of a housing crisis. Among the 1 in 4 households who make less than $35,000 in Ossining, 73% pay over half of their income on rent. An Affordable Housing Committee is one step forward that you can take to address this need. We are calling on the Village Board to consider this proposal and to bring it to a vote no later than the Village Board meeting on April 20th. Thank you for your time.
Your names came up. Would you like to speak?
I didn't have access to the, or I didn't see the proposal before it came before the board tonight, but it certainly speaks to the spirit of the conversations that we've had with CVH. Myself and Trustee Bazemore have met with them following the February meeting. I think that the more information I find out about this, the more I'm convinced that this is something very important for our village board to undertake. I think the committee would be very helpful in educating our community and ourselves about the challenges for those that have economic stress. There are people that have lived here for many years that are now being priced out, and I think we need to do everything we can to keep all people that want to be here and give them the opportunity to live here. So, I would be in support of the committee. Obviously, we all need to sit down and review this together. But on the face of it, I think this is something that we do need to undertake, and the proposal is certainly worth a consideration.
I would just echo John's sentiments. He basically has said all that I would have liked to articulate it. It's been a pleasure working and having these meetings with CVH, and I would thank you for bringing it to our attention and being passionate about the issues that really matter with pertaining to affordable housing, particularly to those who live in extremely low income and low income incomes.
Well, thank you very much for coming and for sharing this. The board's going to have to decide when are we going to do part 2 of our housing conversation at a time with the Director of Planning, Lynn Brooks Avney. And she is certainly going to be watching this meeting and reading all of the material that we share with her, and we'll be following up with her on between now and the next time we have our public conversation about housing. What are we going to have been able to move forward behind the scenes as far as the next time we meet, if we're going to be able to provide more direction in decision making, or if we'll have more informed questions on what we want to ask. Some of the thoughts that come to mind from this presentation is exactly what would be the right composition for the stakeholders on a committee like this, the way that this is presented, this is not a short-term committee. This is an existing council and modifying its mission and its composition. So,
Modifying another existing, right?
correct.
Yeah. Correct.
Okay,
Modifying
and how we would, I'm looking at you because there's an existing,
it's by charter.
yeah.
It's in the code, so you would actually have to undertake a local law process.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would be no less than 45 to 60 days. Just the requirements under the statute in order to
We have to ask the people
review
on it.
review a draft. Make any revisions based upon that. Pass a resolution, setting a hearing, holding hearing.
All right.
That said, if the board and the planner, if we do move forward with a consensus on what we would like the composition to be and how we are going to be proposing it even before it becomes law, these meetings, people can invite guests to be part of a conversation, I would assume. So it wouldn't if the concept were decided upon in the, sooner than the 45 to 60 days, I would think that conversations could be moving forward.
And the committee or council wouldn't necessarily have to take place of or be added to the landlord-tenant council. It could be a
That's true.
standalone council, and we have a number of councils and such, so we could add it to the code in any fashion or form. And
Right, we
you
have
have
to
a
decide.
downtown development fund council that is not codified. It's it's in a land disposition agreement, recorded covenants. So there are many ways to accomplish the goal, and I think that if I'm sensing the board, they feel it's a laudable goal. So we can look at options and see.
I appreciate. I think the reason why it was presented this way is because this would really reinvigorate an existing council without introducing an additional group. But let's see what makes the most sense to achieve the goal. So I appreciate the presentation, and obviously we have some work to do to figure out how to move forward with the concept of a group of people who are going to look into what recommendations the board should consider regarding affordable housing. So thank you. Right.
So we've also have invited Karen DeTore, the executive director of IFCA, to address the board on affordable housing as well.
So before she presents, I would like to disclose again that I work for Interfaith Council for Action.
Thank you. And Karen, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure maybe we can set Karen up with... And Karen's going to need to speak into the mic, so I don't know if we want to give her the keyboard on the podium or something, or...
That would be easier.
Can you just move the mic over to her? That one? No, just I think it moves.
Just take it out. Yeah.
But then she has to hold it like a singer.
Am I in the way? Can you guys see?
Then slideshow up top, over to couple,
Oh, got it.
and then from beginning.
Okay, got it. Sorry about that.
I will. You want to hold it? You want me to
No.
hold it for you?
I'll hold it. I can.
Okay. You just said to hold it close to your mouth.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I am Karen DeTore. I'm the executive director of IFCA Housing Network. IFCA is almost a 50-year-old agency, and the mission is sustaining community, diversity, and opportunity through affordable workforce housing and vital social services. Am I not hitting the right?
Maybe the right arrow.
Oh, There we go. Okay. IFCA owns 14 buildings and 84 units of affordable rental housing. 13 of those buildings are in Ossining, and 76 of those units are in Ossining. So we're not quite on the scale of Joe here, who is doing things on a grand scale nationwide. But we are part of the portfolio of housing, a way to address housing needs in our community. Because what we do is a little bit different. Instead of one contiguous complex of affordable housing, we do what's called scatter site housing. So IFCA has a long history of purchasing properties that are in need of renovations and rehabilitation and rehabilitating them for the sole purpose of providing affordable housing in perpetuity or as long as the organization shall exist. So these are some of the properties that we have in Ossining. Many may be familiar to you. And part of what I was asked to do here was put a face to IFCA. Well, the face to IFCA is, you know, it's people who work in our schools, people who work, and I'll go to the next slide here. It's really people who work in our community. And I think Joe also spoke to this about Snowden House, is you have people working locally who are filling vital jobs that we need. And we need to have them in our community, and people have to be able to afford to live here to do them. So we're talking about people who work in our schools, social workers, healthcare workers, corrections officers.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The veterans, do you have a number of veterans?
It's not a huge number. I mean, our numbers, but we do have veterans. I don't know how many offhand, but we do. So right now, 46% of our tenants are employed. The other 42% are retired or on disability but have been employed. So we're talking about hardworking people who have either worked for a long time or are continuing to work, almost 25% working in Ossining specifically. We also have a small portion, we have 16 units of emergency housing that we run in conjunction with Department of Social Services, and that is to house people who are transitioning from homelessness to permanent housing.
How many units was that?
16. They're constantly full. Yeah, they're constantly full. So we're families. IFCA is families in our community. We have a total of 138 tenants, 63 families, and 50 children under the age of 18. One of the things I wanted to point out tonight is the rental housing crisis is not just specific to Westchester or you know, our local community or in New York State even. It is a nationwide crisis. We're in a state that happens to have over 50% of its residents living cost burden, and that means that they're paying more than 30% of their household income on rent. And that's significant because here in Westchester and here in Ossining, how that translates is basically households with less than $73,400 annually would be cost burden paying Ossining's median rent of $1,835 per month. And approximately 50% of Ossining's household make less than that amount. Not everybody who makes that less than that amount is paying that rent. Some people own their own homes and are just paying their taxes. Everybody has a different situation, but there are a large percentage of people in Ossining who are really spending well beyond 30% of their annual income to have a place with a roof over their heads.
But your chart says that's the same in New York State, or is that?
Yeah, that's same in New York State is over 50%. It's one of the most cost burden states. It was that deep orange. If you go back, you can see.
The Midwest is because it's the other wealthy versus. I mean, it's surprising how many are there. So.
Right. So you could see how it lays out geographically, but certainly we know that Westchester, there's a serious issue based on the high cost of living in Westchester just overall. So just to give some idea of the demographics we're working with, and I think they're very similar to the demographics that were presented for Snowden House. Median annual income of IFCA tenant is $23.9 thousand a year, and that is under 30% annual median income for a family of two. Median annual income for an IFCA tenant who's retired or disabled or on a fixed income is a little, close to $9,000 a year. The average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Westchester, and these numbers are a little old, is almost $1,600 a month. Probably in Ossining, I've talked to a lot of real estate agents here. You're talking about over $2,000 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment in Ossining. And the average rent that we're charging at IFCA is $1,362. At any given time, we have a waiting list of at least 200 people. A large percentage of them are Ossining residents. And so one of the things that IFCA was set up to do is preserve diversity. And as you can tell from this chart, Ossining is a very diverse community. And I think it's something that we all appreciate. It's the reason a lot of us move here, and it's the reason a lot of us stay here. And it's a real value to the community. So in order to preserve that diversity, it's important that we have different ways that people can live here affordably. So whether it's Snowden House, whether it's a scatter site IFCA is doing, whether it's through assistance of programs like Section 8 or ETPA, we need to make sure that we're constantly looking at ways that we can preserve this diversity. So how we're addressing the need right now is we're continuing to do rehabilitation on existing buildings. As we've talked about tonight, there's a distressed housing in Ossining. There's a lot of, actually being a slumlord is a good business in Ossining. You can make a lot of money. So we're definitely looking to work with the village and others in terms of identifying properties, purchasing them, and making sure that they're rehabilitated. We like to use some of the same quality materials that are being used in the rehabilitation of Snowden House. So where we can, it's more durable materials like granite countertops, going to wood floors, trying to get rid of carpeting things to the degree that we can in as many units as possible. And that's preserving what makes Ossining special, and not just the diversity, but also the architecture itself. So this is IFCA's first building that was bought in 1971. It still stands today, and I think it's a lot of you may see it. It's right on Spring Street. And we just rehabilitated this, and we're able to restore it and brought back some of the scallop siding and restored it to its natural original beauty. So that's another way that we help preserve all the things that are good in Ossining. And going forward, we're looking to forge more partnerships with government agencies, nonprofits, other nonprofits, and private sector organizations and developers to create new opportunities for housing and provide greater services. Because in addition to housing, we also run social services. We do a volunteer income tax program that's just wrapping up now. We do financial literacy. We work with other nonprofits pretty closely. And we also run a thrift store that's open 3 days a week. So with that, that's a little summary of what we do there, and I hope it dimensionalizes the people that we serve and how we aid the community, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
I think Abe referenced before, we do have an official relationship with IFCA.
We do have an official relationship.
Do you want to explain our relationship?
Sure. We manage the affordable housing policy in conjunction with the village. So when Abe was talking about the affordable units that the village manages, we do all the pre-qualification for that and the recertifications for those people who are applying for that housing or who live in that housing.
And it was acknowledged that there are 26 units in that program right now with the village, but there are also, I believe, another 22 that are likely to be coming up in upcoming developments.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Between Harbor Square and Hudson Step.
80 Main Street.
Was it 80 Main? Okay.
Hudson Step, actually, those, yes, there's another number there, but there's also...
Okay. That's not happened yet, so we're not counting that yet. Okay.
They're on the way right now, the ones at 80 Main Street and Harbor Square.
Okay, thank you.
But we'd also had that, we did a partnership not too long ago where we got a grant.
Yes, community development block grant funding was released this year for Westchester County, and in the past, nonprofits were able to apply for that money directly. Under the new set of rules, only municipalities can apply for that funding, but we were able to apply in conjunction with the Village of Ossining for affordable housing rehabilitation, and we are the subrecipient of nearly $300,000 worth of grant money.
Definitely good.
For the public, can you speak to the longevity of your tenants?
The longevity of our tenants?
Yeah, how long they actually stay there?
We have tenants that tend to stay for a long time. I don't have the specific percentage of how long people have been there, but a lot of our tenants have worked and lived in the community for a long, long time. And if, you know, a lot of people work in the school district, a lot of people work in local shops around here, and if you don't know them by face, I guarantee your children do. And some people have committed their lives for decades doing things that really have provided tremendous value to all of us, and we may not even realize that.
I would just say I'm so glad you're in the community. I mean, IFCA's a great organization. I've volunteered for them in the past, and I've always been a big fan, and I obviously would like to see you grow and take on more buildings and do more of what you do. And I'm glad you got that grant money, because I'm sure that's going to be very helpful in terms of, you know, taking care of the. I guess it's dedicated to the current buildings you own already. Is that what it's for?
Yeah, the grant money that we have is for buildings that we currently own that some need some capital improvements. One of the things that we do is we take buildings that are really old. So not only do we have tenants who stick with us a long time, our buildings, I think, average about 80 years old, and most of them were built a long, long time ago, and they are in constant need of tender, loving care and dollars. So.
And you've been the executive director for over a year now with IFCA,
about
correct?
a year and a half.
And one of the big initiatives that you undertook when you began was doing energy efficiency upgrades to some of your facilities.
We did. We worked very closely with NYSERDA and New York State Energy and Research Development Authority, and which has been really tremendous for us. So we were able to get all new boilers where we needed them. We were able to do insulation again. Some are buildings really old. Some of them are down by the river, and it gets cold down there, and there's always a constant wind. So all different types of upgrades that we were able to do through a partnership with the state that have made our buildings more energy efficient, greener, and that and the combination of dropping oil prices have really helped us out significantly on our bottom line this year. So
Karen, what's the plan, like the 5-year plan for IFCA? I mean, are you expanding to other municipalities? Are you growing here, Tarrytown? Like, what's the...
We're not opposed to looking at other municipalities, but we are focusing right now most of our resources, and we're just starting our formal strategic planning process. But we're really focusing right now on Ossining because we think there's a lot of work. I think as you could see that needs to be done from this meeting today that can be done here. And we think that there's a way that we can do things that we've done in the past better, smarter, and more effectively. And what we'd really like to do is concentrate where we are and optimize that and create a model that then can be replicated in other municipalities.
That's good. Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our audio guy will step in. Thank you.
Expert audio guy.
And as we've made mention of Lynn Brooks Avni as our director of planning, and the original concept of this piece of the program was that she would then talk to us more about where we are and where we may go. I will express we've been planning this for like 2 months, so it's very fortunate that she's not here. But one of the concepts that we talked about is if we're going to make changes to our comprehensive plan or our zoning codes, that they should be viewed as dynamic documents, and that is our role as a board, is to figure out how we need to amend our code and our comprehensive plan so that it really meets the needs of our community today. And many of the ideas that are being presented today, we're really focusing on housing. There are other pieces of our comprehensive plan that will come into play if we're going to make changes in one area of the comprehensive plan. And there are items that have come up, and we've been trying to do some text amendments that have adjusted in small ways the existing zoning regulations. But if we're going to do it in a bigger way, then this may be the beginning of that process. And so when we go to part 2 of housing, we may want to also be looking more broadly at what process we might want to be looking at for looking more comprehensively at the comprehensive plan, and seeing what the process would be, and then how to make sure that we're staying on track, because it became quite a big process when it was established. What are we up to, 7 years ago now? And one of the things that it said in it is after 5 years you should reevaluate it. So let's decide exactly what the scope of that's going to be. All right. Shall we take a little break because
I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So, do we have any idea when we will continue part 2?
Well, that's what we have to decide. We have next week is a 5th Wednesday. Everybody was kind of psyched to have a Wednesday off. But we could consider doing it next Wednesday, or I hadn't gotten a chance to talk to Manager Zambrano about what is on the agenda for April 13th is very heavily focused on water, and so I wouldn't want to bring 2 big subjects for that. So then the work session after that, do we have a lot on the 27th right now?
Nothing that's time sensitive for the second work session in April, so we could conceivably
that would be a logical time. But if we're going to wait that long, 4 or 5 weeks, then we would want to see what are we going to be moving forward with by that point, so that we're not picking up exactly where we are today, so that we're actually maybe at a point we're going to make some more decisions about the direction.
And if I may just add, Mayor, I think that the Lynn Brooks, after not being here today, I think is going to give us an opportunity to maybe again bring that second work session and develop other ideas, and bring you some things that you can consider at that point, including any of the topics that we discussed tonight, like the ETPA and things like that. If you want to move forward with that, so you can again consider that, as part 2 of the work session in April.
So if we do decide to move to April the 27th, in my mind, there are 2 things that I would hope that we could try to flesh out, that being the Housing Committee and whether or not we're going to do ETPA. Would the rest of the board conceive of that being 2 things that we would want to have fleshed out?
I mean, so far those are the big things that have come up tonight that we have next steps on to explore.
So that will be part of the discussion at that meeting then.
Right, that would be part of it, but I think what Trustee Bazemore is saying is there's got to, if we're waiting for another 4 or 5 weeks, by that point, let's find out exactly how many buildings would be covered by ETPA, and let's find out what it would mean if we were going to do the, so we have the information to make a decision.
Part of the homework, I mean, 5 weeks is we have to do our homework. We have to do our homework to make it, if a decision is made at that time, at least we'll have all the facts together.
Right. Okay. There certainly has been enough interest in those 2 topics. I think there's a consensus of the board that there's an interest in exploring how to move those forward. So we need to get more information so that at the next meeting we're a little more informed and we can keep it moving. So thank you for clarifying that. All right, so with that, does everybody want to take a 5-minute break? And we've got some exciting a presentation about Section 8 coming up and a discussion of concept for a certificate of occupancy law. So. We're back on? Okay, thank you very much. You didn't miss a moment of the action. We're back. Manager Zambrano.
Next item on the agenda is, as you remember, we had asked Marilyn Geraldo, the Director of Section 8, to present to the board at the last legislative meeting a summary of the Section 8 hardship program.
Use your mic.
Sorry. As you remember, we had Marilyn Geraldo present to you at the summary of Section 8 program, and we have asked her to come back this week, so this way she can give you a little more information, more in reference to the qualifications and the income levels. So I'm going to ask her to come up, and she can talk to you about that. Also, this will give, I think, the board, more of an opportunity to ask other questions related to the program that is run by the Village of Housing. So.
Thank you. Right. Scooch around again. No, you're good. You're good.
Enter? No.
But if you use the mouse, you could hover.
Do we have?
That's the one on the top of the to the left, right there.
This one?
Yes. Yep. Okay. All right.
Would you be more comfortable if somebody else did that while you're reading, or?
That's okay. From the Village of Ossining, Housing Choice Voucher Program, formerly known as the Section 8 program. As many of you know, the Housing Choice Voucher Program was established as part of the Federal Housing Act in 1976 and is operated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development through the Village of Ossining. It was designed to help needed family to pay part of the rent. In order to qualify for the program, a person has to apply through a waiting list. There are regulations that require that we target certain income limits. In order to come to the program, you have to be here on the orange part, which is extremely low income, below 30% of the income limits. For example, a family of 4, they have to show that the entire family income has to be below $31,700 in order to come and receive a voucher when we have vouchers available to start looking for a place. We do have 4 different types of preference for local residents or families that are working in the Village of Ossining. Preference for elderly or disabled, that also includes veterans and people with domestic violence. The first preference, right now, the waiting list is closed. We do have about 3,800 applications active on the waiting list. Out of that, from the first preference, which includes family, elderly, and disabled individual, living or working in the Village of Ossining, we have on the top preference 204 applications. On the second preference, which is single individuals living or working in the Village of Ossining, there's about 59 applications. The third preference, which is the larger one, is for family, elderly, and disabled individuals not living or not working in the Village of Ossining. And the fourth preference is for individuals who are single individuals not working or living in the Village of Ossining. As you can see, that the families that we most target are families with children, which is 66%. And we also target over here extremely low income. 84% of our applications are at below 30% of the income limits. We do have occupancy standards. It's two of the maximums per room. For example, husband and wife will be 1 bedroom. Siblings of the same sex will be a 1 bedroom, or opposite sex up to the age of 6 will be entitled to a separate bedroom. We try to limit, if it's a 1 bedroom, we don't put more than 3 people in that apartment, and this also has to do with building codes and safety issues within the building. Once a family is established, they're eligible for a voucher. They get 60 days to look for a place. They will submit a request for tenancy, and we will go and do an inspection to the apartment, and hopefully we pass inspection and we commence with the Section 8 program. They do get extensions, 2 per each, 30 days each, a total of 120 days. Once those 120 days expire, they will have to reapply again. We are required by HUD to do inspections to the unit. We have to make sure that everything is safety before tenants move in, before we do any new lease, and before we start a contract with the landlord. The total tenant payment is based on their income. 30% of the adjusted income or 10% of the monthly gross income. There is a shelter allowance based, the person is receiving public assistance, and there's a minimum $50 currently through our office. That's the minimum that the person could pay in the program. There's also payment standards, which required by HUD based on the fair market rents. Just to give you an example how we work out the income, all the family income, like in the other programs, is added to an annualized income. Just to give you an example, if a family of 4 is making about $30,000, they do qualify because they're under the $31,700. The $30,000, which is the annualized income, it gets divided by 12 times 30%, and this will be the tenant's share of the rent. We don't allow anyone pay more than 40% of their share of the rent because the rent will be too high, and we have to make sure that they have enough to subsidize that part of the rent that we're not covering. Just to give you an example, this is the fair market rent for the Westchester County area. The 2-bedroom is $1,510. We are above the fair market rent. We are 110%, and we pay $1,661 for a 2-bedroom apartment. To give you an example, a 2-bedroom, if the family finds an apartment which is about $1,600 plus utilities, will add that to the gross rent, which is $1,650. The tenant share, which is $750, and we subsidize the difference of $900 that goes directly to the landlord through direct deposit or a check, however they want to. All the apartment has to be rent reasonableness. We do check and compare with other units in the surrounding area to make sure that the rents are not too high and the price is just within the market area. Just to give you an average of the income on the family, most of this is based on the current vouchers that we have, which is about 250 families per month that we help, per year. Based on their income, most of them are below extremely low income, which is about $21,749. The average tenant payment, which is what they pay towards the rent, is about $500, and we subsidize about $973, $975. This is also the number how we get funding from HUD. Based on this number here is how much funding HUD will send to the program for us to continue issuing vouchers and helping other families. With the affordable housing program, for example, a family of 4, we target this family here. Their share of the rent, 30%, is about $993. With affordable housing, the rent is established at 30%, which kind of around $1,750, around with the fair market rent, with the affordable housing, which in case is very difficult for a family in our program to enter any of the affordable housing. We do have family at the affordable housing, but it's a very low percentage.
You're referring to the Village Affordable Housing Program?
Yes.
So those 26 units we were talking about would have to agree to have a rent at $1,790, which, as you've already stated, is lower than the average rent in Village of Austin.
Yes, and out of those 26, we have 9? I know 7 people from here from the Village of Ossining, and there's about 2 other from another housing authority that's being funded.
Yeah. So they have vouchers from another municipality that was brought here to the village. Right.
We are located in here in the building, in the rear of the building. If anyone has any questions, they could give us a call, or they could come into the office Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from 9 to 2, or others by appointments only. That'll be it for me today.
So thank you for your presentation. It was definitely eye-opening and a little more clear than last week. So just to be clear, in order to enter into the program, I would have to be at below 30%. So if I'm at 50% and you call my name, you wouldn't. I would not qualify.
Most of the time, we have to target 75% of that criteria that we met have to be at a 30%. And
Okay.
yes, you're right. If you are at the time that we call you, you apply under that criteria to be under 30%. And when we revise your income, it comes at 50%. We return you back to the waiting list.
Gotcha.
We don't close. We just return you back, and then a later time we will call you under the 50% income median.
I'm sure there's other questions. John?
How do we get more vouchers?
I asked that question last week, John.
It wasn't a good answer, as I recall.
Well, I didn't like the answer I got, so I'm asking again. I mean, I know you're not. I know you're not responsible for that, but I mean, in your experience, I mean, how does this happen? HUD has to give us
more vouchers. We have to wait into HUD release. It has more funding and gets more vouchers out. It all has to do with HUD fundings in order for us to get more vouchers. If they do become available, then we have to apply and request for 10, 20 at a time. And as I remember, prior to me coming in, that was done. There was about 200 vouchers or 190 vouchers. and they did receive extra fundings, but more than 10 years ago.
So, question now. We have Snowden here with us today. Now, people who have the voucher program wouldn't live in Snowden, right? That would, because those are two.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. The Snowden house is with the unit.
Okay.
Those certificates are with the unit. With the Section A, they get a voucher, they can move anywhere.
So, if I'm in Snowden and you call my name, once I get that voucher, it's time for me to leave.
Yes.
Okay.
Stone House is one building that we've identified that has the HAP program. What are the other buildings in Ossining that provide that as also?
We have buildings with IFCA. The other building that I know is Maple House, but it's also as Snowden House. You know, it's just with the building, with the property, not that you could move out.
25 State Street is not under that program?
I don't think so.
I'm not aware. I
No,
don't think so. We do have families there, but they're not part of my understanding. They're not.
All right, because
part
you have
of
Section
the
8 families there, so it couldn't
Yes.
be. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions?
Just one
Yes.
thing, I'm sorry, Mayor. Can you just talk about the process that a tenant or one of the customers goes through once the voucher is given to them? What do they have to do to be able to make that voucher active?
Once they're given a voucher, means that they qualify, they meet all their criterias. They go and look for an apartment. Then it's called a request for tenancy. It's a form that the landlord, the tenant sign. They will put the agreement of the rent, security deposit, and whose responsibility to pay which utilities. Then we send the building department, goes and inspect the apartment. The apartment has to be within building codes. Once it's approved, if there's no deficiency, then we sit down and draw a lease and a contract for that unit, for that person. That person will be in the program into their income is probably in the 80%, which they'll be paying most of their rent, and they no longer need assistance.
Question. I know with like Putnam County, if you get Section 8 there, you have to stay there a year. Is there a requirement that once you get the voucher here in Ossining, that you have to remain in Ossining a year, or?
If the voucher is issued for a person who is locally here from the village, living or working, and they could demonstrate that they have more than a year here, then they could move out. They could use that voucher anywhere. But if they were just given a voucher and they cannot prove that they have more than a year, they'll have to use it here first.
And so if they're unable to, in that case, if they're unable to find an apartment within 4 months, then they lose the voucher.
Yes, the voucher expires, and then they have to reapply again.
And is there incidences where people who are newly here get a voucher and then it expires, or do most of the people who receive vouchers are those people who have been here for more than a year or more?
Most of them, yes, they've been here. Right now, those are the people who are targeting. If we get an application and we notice that they cannot provide sufficient proof that they're resident, we will get them back to the waiting list. But yes, most of them get issued a voucher. I would say 50% of them are able to use it here. The other 50, they can't find apartments, and they will have to sometimes transfer to another office. And I would say maybe at 25% of the vouchers expires, that they're not able to find anything.
So when you said that someone kind of, after 4 months, loses a voucher because they cannot find an apartment here for rent, why is that? Is that because landlords tend not to? Let's say you put a 2-bedroom for about pretty much $2,000, and the presentation from IFCA was before, but you're allowed to pay, or the average should be like $1,500 or $1,300. So if you don't find an apartment within that range, it's either because we go back to a very delicate subject. Taxes are too high, and part of that is landlords cannot afford to have that apartments to be less than that, or it's just misinformation in regards to the landlords, because as soon as they said, oh, Section 8, we don't take Section A. So it's like a mislabel sometimes that some people have in regards to even affordable housing or Section 8 in these regards. So have you, and I guess I should have asked that question to IFCA as well, but I'm asking you now, do you find that a lot going on here?
Yes, unfortunately, it's a combination of both. It is the housing, the market rent. It's what we offer is very low. Most of the two-bedrooms apartment that are renovated, that are in the nice neighborhood, are over 1,800, and it's very hard on landlord to bring the rent down to at least 1,700. The other misconception is that they hear about Section 8. They only hear about the low percentage of negative information from tenants. They don't hear about the great families that we have in the program. We have the teachers, we have the bus monitors, we have people working in the supermarket, very decent people, people with disability, that they do have the income and very responsible, but is the misleading of that 1 or 2% that didn't pay the rent or destroy the apartment, but not all the tenants do that. We do have very good participants.
I think it goes with that with anything. Sometimes a one bad percentage of anything damage something that is actually good. You're gonna say something? So I think it's more like an educational tool that we need to provide, or maybe Westchester County has something to try to educate our community in regards to that, and to see how, if we're going to solve, I don't think no one will be able to solve 100% the affordable housing itself that Westchester County, actually the whole part of the United States is suffering on this, but we can definitely try to help educate our people, educate our community. So how do we do that? How do we educate our community in regards to that? How do we work together to solve an issue that, sometimes it's just about talking and just educating people in regards to what this does and how does this work. So I don't know. I mean, that's part of, I guess, of a work session that we need to find, or maybe as a municipality, we need to contact Westchester County, contact anybody up in Albany to be like, all right, this is what we have, this is what we're doing, where do we go from here, and how do you help us to solve an issue that is nationwide, not just locally.
Vouchers at individuals, and I'm expressing this for people who, because I've been on a journey to learn to understand this, and we've talked about a lot of different ways that housing is available in our community. Maybe not at the levels that we need, clearly not, because you've got, what, I didn't write down the number, but it was 204 people on just the first, the first tier that live in Ossining or work in Ossining that are on your waiting list. IFCA has 200 people on their waiting list. Snowden House is pretty full, right? Over 100 on your waiting list. Okay, so we're over 500 people that are on waiting lists for low-income housing in Ossining, and I imagine the village has a waiting list for our affordable housing program. So there are hundreds of people who would like to have access to affordable housing in the community. And there are a variety of ways a variety of avenues that people are trying to get access to it. And I think one of the important things for the public to understand is for people who don't spend as much time trying to understand affordable housing, they may think that we have plenty of affordable housing in our community. But they may not be recognizing what affordable housing is versus housing that they think is inexpensive, but really maybe substandard housing. And that's an entirely different issue. And we talked about safe housing. That's what we were talking about, was conditions that are clearly not being inspected by Section 8 inspectors when somebody's showing up with a voucher. And I would say landlords that accept Section 8, first of all, they're not allowed to discriminate if they're of any size whatsoever. It's illegal to make it, and what's the proper language?
Source of income.
Source of income. You're not allowed to discriminate because of source of income, and that's for how many units? What's the minimum unit?
6 or more.
Oh, okay, so all the small multifamilies in our community are not subject to that protection. I mean, even if they are subject to that protection, then it's pretty easy for them to sort of find ways around it. But there is a little bit of a higher standard that you're kept to if you're a landlord that has a tenant who uses a Section 8 voucher to pay for their rent, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Could you explain a little bit about what that is?
When we enter with a contract with the landlord, we had to make sure, like I said, We go through the building codes, the inspector goes, and make sure that apartment is in good condition. The landlord gets paid as long as that family is there. Doesn't matter what income, whether they're not working, whether they got a new job, they're always going to get funding directly from the program. Pay part of the rent through them. That's guaranteed that's going to be there. The good part, if for temporary the person doesn't have a job for a couple of months for whatever reason, due to the economy, due to whatever, we will continue to pay the rent to that landlord directly. So there's a lot of benefits. But the landlords have to do the research. When they see a family, they have to ask the questions the same way they ask to any other tenant, and not just say, oh, you're Section 8, I don't want you. Just have to give the opportunity to that family. They're very, like I said, I am pro to all my families in the program. They're very good people. Once the landlord, I educate them over the phone, ask this, ask for that, not just for a credit score. Most of these families don't have a credit card, believe it or not. And ask them, look at the Con Ed bill if they pay on time. Ask from the previous landlord, ask for recommendation, and that helps a lot. I have been able to put a lot of new landlords with that mentality, give an open mentality. Ask so the question is not just based on a credit score. It might be a family that never had a credit card, believe it or not. Today, say that's most of the families like that.
I don't have a credit card.
There you go.
I don't.
Okay, well, that's an interesting topic of discussion for another time. Okay, thank you for coming back and for highlighting and breaking out some of the numbers for us and answering more questions. Does anybody else have any more comments or questions for Marilyn on the Section 8 program? Rika?
Well, I mean, I've been doing a lot of research about White Plains, different parts, our demographics similar to White Plains. It's, throughout all these different government websites, I see big red letters that say closed, 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 not available. I mean, it's an issue in this county. It's an issue in this state and amongst many states. I mean, north of here and south of here, there are more availabilities, so I can understand this whole transferability of the vouchers. Jersey has availabilities, upstate New York, but this county is like one big closed sign. Every time I went on the website, no matter how I went through the process, it's been a learning experience. Since you spoke last week, I've actually been doing a lot of my own research. So I thank you for coming last week also.
I would like to ask just one question about the numbers. You have 250 vouchers that are active out of your program right now, at least as of last week. And they do have this transferability component. If somebody takes the voucher and goes to another municipality in the state or anywhere in the country, do they get to keep that as part of the Ossining 250? And how long does that continue?
Yeah, we do have about 7 to 10 families that we are paying or subsidizing their rent out of Ossining, yes. And it has to do, someone moved to North Carolina, their payment standards are lower than ours. Mm-hmm. So in this case, if that other Section 8 office does not have any open vouchers, they let the family move, but we got to pay the rent locally from the village of Ossining, and then that voucher is on hold into the other agency absorb that tenant or that
For how
voucher.
long? Yeah, that was the other thing I read about the transferability, because in upstate New York, but actually North Carolina is one of the very popular moves there. Virginia, North Carolina.
Is it just because it's less expensive to live?
Well, it's all about the economics. It's less expensive to live, so you come here and that's
It's less expensive to live everywhere unless you're going to Hawaii or LA.
But
so.
our vouchers,
not everywhere. Washington D.C., for
Okay.
example, not. But there's even upstate New York is cheaper. If you go about a couple of hours, it's logical. There's a whole bunch of municipalities that are much cheaper than here.
Yes.
Just wanted to comment, as we had a conversation about housing committees. I think, that's actually one of the purposes of a couple of housing committees in Westchester. That is to educate. And I think, that's just what's vastly needed, is the education of the general community to understand what affordable housing is and what voucher programs are.
Just had a quick question. So we have a lot of that. You manage all within the village. Is anything on the town of Ossining at all?
No, we only cover the village.
Just
if
the
anyone
village.
wants to transfer to a town, then we send it to CVR in Westchester. We don't handle the town.
Okay.
Town of Ossining.
Town of Ossining, we don't, yes. We only do the village, yes.
The village General fund pays for the program.
No, but I just assumed it also expanded out. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks
you,
very
Marilyn.
much.
Thank And the last item on tonight's agenda is something that we just wanted to discuss with the board conceptually. Again, these are some of the ideas that we want to present to you for your consideration as a way to be able to, again, be able to ensure safe housing in the village. So, again, this is just for discussion. Corporation Council will talk to you about it. So,
Thank you. This is just one example, a conceptual example of a creative way that a community similar to ours, Peekskill, is actually looking at code enforcement and ensuring that the records are updated and that the units, the living units, are up to code. And also, it's also a way for open permits to get closed. They've added a provision. They added a provision in 2006. The program is 10 years old. They added a provision 10 years ago whereby you needed to update your certificate of occupancy anytime there was a sale or a transfer of an improved real property, which means, and I actually had a lengthy conversation today with the code enforcement officer, Chief of Code Enforcement Jim Howard in Peekskill, just to get an idea of what it was like when they rolled it out and how he's found the experience up to this point. I also did spend some time discussing the issue with our planner, Lynn, before she had to go home. But she had some thoughts and ideas on it as well, and I would welcome bringing this up again on a conceptual basis. But this is just a single example of one way that you can look toward ensuring compliance. He said that, Mr. Howard said that 10 years ago, they rolled this out and there was initial pushback, but once the individuals, property owners, realized this was one-stop shopping, and as he said, it was a get-out-of-jail-free card, because what it does is, if you say you're inheriting a property that's been in your family 3 generations, and what you're inheriting is a bunch of upgrades or changes in the property that didn't go through the proper processes and channels. This is a way for it not to go to code enforcement necessarily, but for it to immediately become part of an initial inspection, a punch list, a follow-up inspection, and then signing a certificate of occupancy, closing all of the permits, closing all the loopholes, and bringing the records up to date. He said actually they're going through the process now of sometimes a unit or a property will come up a second time for a sale, and it's a much quicker pickup at that point because the records are up to date, the permits are all closed, and it becomes a much easier turnaround. The inspection and the process is within 60 days of a potential closing date. If the closing is delayed for any reason, they are very amenable to putting things on hold and waiting for a new closing date. They also take a fee for an expedited review. Say the process is having to close in the next 5 or 6 days, they'll do an expedited review. It's a very comprehensive look. They I went on their website and copied down the form. The form is standardized. They get a punch list. A single-family home, it's a $100 application fee, which gives you the inspection, the punch list, and also the reinspection if you have to return to the property because people have been remiss and not moving through the process quick enough, then there's an additional fee that's assessed. But these cases don't have to go to code enforcement in the court. They're all done from within and by existing staff. They have a staff of very similar to ours, 2 building inspectors and 2 code enforcement officers. And he said they get, depending on the season, because some point property sales are increased. I guess over the summer, the closings are increased because families tend to want to be in before the new school year starts. So he said it's between 5 and 10 applications a week. It is staff time, but he said he finds the fact that the court calendars are lessened and the amount of time you have to spend in court repeatedly adjourning and babysitting court cases. He said it's a trade-off. He said the realtors are very impressed with it and have signed on wholeheartedly because it takes the realtors out of the formula in that the records are clearly updated. It's across the board in an inspection. They're not having to guess, is it 3 units, is it 2 units? I sold it as a 3-unit, but then when the new family went and tried to do something with that 3rd unit, they realized it wasn't a legal unit, and then they're not looking to the realtor for any reason. So it's a very comprehensive process. It's, of course, when buildings are occupied. It doesn't apply to buildings that are short saled from a bank, vacant properties, that kind of thing, because this is an expedited process and it moves very quickly. And he said that you save the taxpayers who are selling or properties between $5,000 and $10,000 in court penalties and fines, plus the cost of a lawyer, plus all of the time it takes for staff to move something through. So it's not an amnesty per se, but it really works like a comprehensive process anytime the property changes hands. So what I did was I inserted it right into your code so you could see how it would fit. But it is only one small example from other communities. I do have the legal intern and I have been working for a couple of weeks on a couple of other sort of different conceptual ideas, which I'd like to bring back when we've looked into it further. The city of Rochester just survived a challenge to a new inspection law. So I'd like to understand the limitations on that and get some guidance from the court. It had to do with renewable certificates of occupancy. So it's along the same lines as what we have here, plus there are other communities doing some unique things on Long Island. I'm looking through those codes and seeing if there's some other areas we can tweak. But this is an example, and I know Lynn had some ideas. They weren't all positive, so I know you would benefit from hearing from her in terms of what her feelings were about adding this. But Mr. Howard said he'd be happy to answer any specific questions any of you had or anything. Lynn would like to speak to him too, so he was welcoming conversations and follow-up as well. So that's what it is for what it's worth. It's a concept. It's one kind of tool.
Wow, thanks. That's actually a really surprising report. That's not what I was expecting, which is, it's nice to be surprised at these meetings. Anybody want to start us off here? John?
Yeah, we'd sort of talked about this before, probably, I think, a year ago. Really? You think
I think Manny included it 3 years ago when he was pushing a whole bunch of laws for us to consider.
So I think,
2014.
I mean, pending Lynn's thoughts about this, I think this works for a couple of reasons. One that you had already mentioned, but I think one of the things that it does, it kind of draws a line in the sand around, buildings and structures, and obviously residential housing. And I don't know if we can apply this to commercial buildings, but at the end of the day, it draws a line in the sand and says, okay, we inspected this building. We know it's up to code. We know it's all the things that it's supposed to be. And that from that date forward, we'll certainly know if there's anything altered because, that house can't be sold unless it gets another C of O. And it also puts the seller's got skin in the game. They're going to have to make sure that building's up to code. Guess what? That transaction's not happening unless that C of O's there. It's just not going to happen. And I think this is a very important legislation in our comprehensive look at making sure that the buildings that we have in the village are up to code, up to standard, and as you indicated before. The real estate brokers love it because they're not going to be put in a bad position here. The building department is doing all the things, saying, "Hey, I'm representing this as this, and you have to this has to meet the code in order for that seller to, transact that property." So I'm very much in favor of this, and I'd like to see this move along as quickly as we can.
So,
Pending Glenn's review, obviously.
Of course.
and her thoughts.
so I just want to make sure that I understood you correctly. If once they go through this process, if there was something that was illegal, and now it becomes legalized, and we stamp, we say, hey, it's okay, and then the hope is that the next time someone sells it, that the records are kept up to date that way?
The initial round, say if all of the units would go through this process, that initial round would clean up all of the open permits, it would clean up anything that anyone did without knowing they needed to get a permit or without, either with or without knowledge of their error. It takes it out of the realm of the code enforcement, and it's not designed to be punitive. What it's designed to do is to get everybody on the same page. This is what the property is. These are all the things that have been done. Here are all the permits that are opened and closed. Here are all the inspections. And all of that's in a punch list, and you get that on your first inspection.
And in order to do this, is this the only way to do it, or is there other options to?
Well, that's what I'm looking
an
at
idea.
some of this other
I think the
research.
issue that comes up all the time is people who buy houses are not expert in real estate. You buy a house, the realtor tells you it's 3.5 bedroom, 2 baths, and you buy them and you look at the house and go, yeah, that looks right to me. They're not owners of big buildings or developers. People don't go to the codes to look at stuff. You buy the house, it's for sale, you're done. And then you find out that the 3-bedroom that you thought you bought is really supposed to be a 2-bedroom. Like, you didn't know that. So now you're ending up punishing people who may be somewhere for 20, 30, there's somebody 60-something years who sits there saying, what are you talking about? I've kept up this house, and now I can't afford to sell it based on what you want me to do because I have to take this deck down and this garage down. And I think there are amnesty programs, which sounds like it's actually not a real amnesty program. Some municipalities have instituted everything before because you're trying to clean up your inventory without creating a bottleneck, is what I'm hearing. This is an interesting idea. It's like a hybrid.
Yes.
Not quite an amnesty, but we develop a way to say, it's sort of like, we forgive you, but you got to do it now. And we don't forgive everything because you still have to do some things. And it allows you going forward for no one to be able to say, really, people that buy single homes are not experts, especially if it's their first home. And in this community, there are a lot of homes that are old, when things were done very differently. So I think this is sort of an interesting idea, although you said you're going to research a few other.
I am, to see if there were
Similar
other
villages
sort of,
to
yes. And I'm not adverse to doing sort of an amalgamation of things as well, but I knew that this one was on the books for 10 years. I had a connection to speak to Mr. Howard, and I took the opportunity this afternoon. Now,
I'm sorry, so you're saying for 10 years,
For 10
this
years.
has sort of been working so we could actually look at data and
Yeah,
say,
I was looking-
all right,
yeah.
this is not something
Yeah.
new. It's
people were concerned, he said, up front because of the additional staff time, but they've worked it out because they don't have to babysit the cases during a code enforcement calendar at court. So they've worked it out and they schedule it like any other inspection. He said the other problem was that the realtors were concerned up front that it would be another added layer of regulation, but what it's turned out to be is it's sort of part and parcel of the municipal searches. A commercial lending institution will always do this level of research before they lend on a piece of property. So you'd rather have it all taken care of, so it sort of benefits the transaction rather than holds up the transaction.
And so the only other question is, it's single-family homes, what else?
It's any size residence, or it's a condo and a co-op as well. So
Really?
it's a different pricing for a single-family home, different pricing for a two-family home, different pricing for, commercial units, that kind of thing.
So you're not going to have a lot in co-ops and condos because they have to be approved anyway. Those
Correct,
people usually
typically.
don't. It's more.
Yeah.
So
He said those are very simple. That's a lesser fee. And he said they also work with individuals of older homes because, their housing stock is aged much like ours. He said they work with the property owners. They understand that if it's a third generation in the family kind of situation, there may not be an updated survey on the books. And as long as the lender's happy with the survey that's produced, I mean, why would they stand in the way and require up to date? If all of the structures appear on the survey, they work with the property owners and take they take surveys of an age that you wouldn't necessarily take if you were code enforcing in the
But we could
court.
also work with that. We don't have to follow their exact formula. And did you say commercial properties too, or John said he was thinking it's commercial, but is it commercial or just residential?
No, it's just
They're just doing
residential.
residential. And what happens with mixed use? All of these businesses and apartments.
It's the apartments that get the COs.
And I'm actually, I'm sorry, were you?
No, I'm done. I was just sort of interested in what.
So I'm actually glad to see that it's coming back after 3 years. So hopefully it won't take another 3 years to go forward. Anyway,
I do have this one
I know.
still here, so if
No,
you want to return
I know.
to landlord,
and part of that
registry.
information, some of that stuff, it was actually, I sent you a bunch of links, I sent you a bunch of other stuff. I was actually pushing for Peekskill because it was a very similar community that we have here. And actually, I know the building inspector when he was a code enforcement, so I had plenty of conversations with him in regardless to a lot about either overcrowding housing or just in general. And that's definitely part of the research also was, and you and I had several conversations in regards to what Portchester does and how do they do it over there. They do it a little bit differently when they do an amnesty program, which is different than what this is.
Yes.
I guess to me, I would like to move forward as soon as possible, in a way. And this, to me, I don't know. I'm a little afraid right now for us to look other areas. You can do it, I guess. We can definitely. I would like to get that. You said Lynn was a little bit.
I think you would
hesitant to
benefit
what,
from Lynn's comments.
Yeah, of course, definitely. I
Yes.
would like to hear what she has in mind and why she's opposed, maybe. So.
Right, so their demographics, they have a lot more I'm looking at their.
Yeah. No,
Their
but
demos are a little bit different, but they're.
But 6 years ago or 10 years ago, it was totally different from what it looks now. Definitely. So that's when I remember when they started doing a lot of that stuff and code enforcement at night and over the weekends as well. So, I'm glad to see this back in the books. So.
We do, of course, still have the landlord registry law. It's ready to go. We did table that one, so.
But, it's
That's-
interesting you say. It's interesting you say that.
I love the landlord registry.
That's another arrow in your quiver on that one. But let me just remind folks who may not watch this every single week for years. Some of us have the joy of spending Wednesdays together, and before that Tuesdays together. This was when we talk about Trustee Quesada shared a number of laws with us. The goal was to look for more tools to help us address our overcrowded housing concerns. And in this case, it's an opportunity to get into a property, for the building department to get into a property. And it's a way to do it that is not necessarily punitive because something horrible happened. It would just get into any residential units. And particularly smaller residential units, it's very difficult to get access because there's not an annual fire inspection if you're smaller, like a two-family house, for example. And the tricky part is, there's two concerns that I feel like we really need to explore with anything, and this is why I don't tend to support the landlord-tenant, the landlord registry rather, is finding the balance between a bureaucratic burden on the many in an effort to bring into line a small list of offenders. And so whether you think that is the case with the landlord registry or not, I need to better understand if that might be the case in this instance. That said, if I had if I did a tally on how many phone calls, visits, and emails I got on people who need help with housing and people who need help working through the building department, that would be most of my time. And when people are selling homes, we hear a variety of concerns. I'm selling my home, and the person who owned it before me opened a building permit to put in a fancy bathroom, and they never did it, but the permit wasn't closed, and now I have to pay an electrician or some professional hundreds of dollars to come in and prove it was not done so that I can close the building permit that I never opened before I can sell my house to somebody. So, or there's a whole neighborhood of houses that I know Abe has integrally involved with talking to realtors and property owners. There's a whole neighborhood of houses that when they were built, there were plans where some additional bedrooms could have been built, but they weren't. And so the records were never maintained properly, and now when they come before the building department when somebody wants to sell it, there is no amnesty program, and people spend a lot of time and money trying to sell their house because of messy record keeping in the past. Would this program, if this program is designed in a way that it would streamline that process and save people money and time when they're trying to sell their house, then that would really be an asset to the many, not just to a few offenders. So that's what I'd want to understand.
It is true. If the property you're selling is pristine, it's a fee and a visit. You don't even get the punch list. You don't even need to take a second visit to make sure everything's done. If it's a pristine property, which the many, we would assume, are that way, you fill out the application. You could download it from online. It's very straightforward with just basic property information, and then the code enforcement officer comes and says, check, check, check. Yep, it's done. Here's your new CO. So the many, the same many would be that situation.
Well, then what about the people who they're not people who are trying to, they weren't putting in illegal bathrooms. They weren't, they weren't putting in illegal kitchens. They, or maybe they were, but they want to sell their house now. Yeah. But what if these people who through no fault of their own, are finding themselves having to spend a lot of time and money to be able to sell their homes? Would this be a streamlined process? Would this be a less expensive process?
I would assume it would be. If it's a single-family home, it's in Peekskill, for example, it's $100. It's one visit. It's a single punch list of all these items. When you then take it upon yourself, you get through the punch list, you call, they come back. The second inspection's free. They give you CO.
I assume that means, though, you're hiring the electrician to certify that the work that was done without a permit originally is now up to code, indeed up to code.
You would do all of that comprehensively, yes.
So it's the same thing that may be required when somebody's selling a house now. It's just that they didn't.
It's a one-stop shop, yeah.
Well, except that now the individual has to go through the process. The individual is now then given, orders to remedy. The process is a lot longer, and I think is not as comprehensive with what we have right now, and it's a little more.
And part of that, and part of the amnesty program, I guess some of that, there's the difference is here right now. If you find someone that did an illegal addition or anything illegal of that matter where you have to hire a plumber or an electrician or an architect, the building department fee doubles.
Yes. Yeah, it's a penalty,
so
correct.
There's a penalty to it. So with the amnesty program, it's like you just pull in a building permit for the first time. So there's no penalties added to that particular portion.
This is not an amnesty program.
But
yes.
it would resemble that in that we can,
correct.
Right, you could make this provision like you were pulling it for the first time. It would not apply, and you could write the language, this does not apply into section, it's 27, I can look it up.
Realistically understand what's involved, and I want to speak to maybe a couple of realtors for here.
Sure.
Bottom line is, somebody bought a house and they would argue, where were all you people when I bought the house and you didn't? Sorry, where were all you people? I bought the house in good faith. I've lived here, I don't know, 15 years, 10 years. So you didn't do it when you were supposed to, but now you want me to do it for thousands. Okay, electricians in this area?
Yep.
Plumbers? Okay, these people not only aren't available in the 3 weeks you need them because you're trying to sell your house, knowing that you need this, I'm assuming just increased what they're going to charge you to do all this, right? It's a supply and demand business, all of these businesses. The plumbers, electricians, now that you need that and you need it by the time you close, which you're given, what, 60 days or whatever it is? I mean, we really have to carry through some of the houses that we have and ask some of the realtors who've been around for a while. And, you know, we shouldn't be punishing people who in good faith may have done nothing to the house and now have to pay because somebody before, because they could argue, where was the municipality when I bought the house?
Yeah.
And these are people that have been paying taxes, because they own a house, right? So these are the highest paying taxpayers here. So I think we have to work through some of them and create whatever makes sense for Ossining.
Correct.
So that, I mean, you want people to be able to sell the house. That's when people buy houses, and when they can sell it quickly, that's what makes them valuable, actually.
And the other item that we'll need to, that you touched on, that we need to understand from Lynn, and maybe we can get better insight from the experience of Peekskill, is the burden on the resources of our building department and how, if we're able to accommodate that, and what that would really look like. So.
Yes.
Any further questions on this?
I
Or
just have one. Does anybody know how many houses we sell on an average in a month around here?
any realtors in the room?
No, I think we
No?
have that up there. Okay. And they do 5 to 10
A week?
in the busy season a week?
Yeah. I mean, they get 5 to 10 in a
In the
week
busy, like
in the
this.
busy season.
And
Right.
this doesn't include like home equities. This is pure actual change of ownership.
Occupancy, right. Yeah.
All right. Do you need to do before the
No,
end of
no,
the
no,
meeting?
you guys
Okay.
go ahead.
Very good, because that's the last thing on our agenda. We need a motion to adjourn to executive session for advice, legal.
Counsel.
Advice of counsel, thank you.
So move.
Second.
On the board. That's us. All in favor? Aye. With that, I thank you for joining us. Next week is a fifth Wednesday. We are not anticipating having a meeting, so I hope you will join us at the Birdsall-Fagan Police Court facility in 2 Wednesdays, which, whatever the first Wednesday of April is, we will be there. I believe it's the 6th. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned to executive session.